Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
One Piece Fates Intertwined by Demonheart12. What if the time difference between Luffy and Robin was much smaller? What would happen if he arrived on her island somehow before the Buster Call happened? How will their presence in each other's lives affect each other? Follow their adventures as they grow together and sail the seas in hopes of achieving their dreams. I don't own anything. Adios.
The pirate trio. It was a tense standoff in the courtyard beside the marine base, with Morgan breathing flames out of his nose while trying to burn the straw hat wearing boy and the dark-haired girl that came to his island and dared to defy him. His men were standing, not getting what was happening around them. As for the pirate couple, they were standing facing Morgan's men, ready for their first fight with the Marines. The green-haired swordsman was baffled, to say the least, as he stood near the post. Luffy then looked at his girlfriend and asked her, "Robin, think you can hold them till I give Zoro his swords?" The girl smiled, "Go for it." Then she added, "They won't know what hit them." Morgan laughed, "I'd like to see you trying that." He then looked at his men and said, "What are you waiting for? If guns don't work, then use your swords." He finished the sentence as he roared at them. The men then hesitantly drew their swords and lunged at the girl. One tried to cut, only for Robin to sidestep him and grab his arm, throwing him over his shoulders, making the others gawk at how strong this petite-looking girl is. Robin laughed and said, "I didn't train my entire life to be weak." Another came from behind, swiping at her feet, only for her to jump and kick him in the face. Another poor fellow tried to hit her, but this time she sprouted an arm and caused him to trip on the ground. The men gulped, one thought going through their minds: if the girl is this strong, then how strong is the boy? While Robin was holding the Marines the best she can, Luffy made his way toward Zoro, and put his swords in front of him, and said, "All right, these are the swords, Zoro, that I found." "Which one is yours?" the boy asked. Zoro then said, "All of them are mine." Luffy tilted his head in confusion. "Really? How do you fight with them?" "I use a Sentrou technique, 3-sword style," the green-haired man explained. "Really? How does that work?" Luffy asked, genuinely intrigued. "Give them to me, and I'll show you," the swordsman demanded, reaching out for his swords. "No, not until you join my crew," Luffy stated, taking the swords away from him. Zoro was about to charge the boy and take his swords by force, but he looked at Robin and noticed a weird look on her. It was like she was seeing if he was a man of honor. Zoro sighed as he stepped forward and grabbed his swords, and said, "Listen, rubber for brains, I didn't make any promise to join your little ragtag crew of pirates." Luffy frowned at those words but smiled when he heard the rest of the swordsman talk. "But now that I'm fighting the Marines, here's what's going to happen," he said as he drew his first sword. "Now, I'll be their enemy since I fought them," he said, then continued, "so I'll make a deal with you. If you manage to impress me, I'll join you. If you don't, then you'll leave me alone. Deal?" he asked, drawing his second sword. Luffy smiled and said, "Deal." He knew that he already had the green-haired swordsman in the bag. "Great," Zoro said as he drew his third sword, putting it between his teeth, and in a blink of an eye went to help Robin, who was beginning to get overcrowded with enemy forces. In a mere moment, he blocked all the Marines' swords, and said to them in a ghostly voice, "Go ahead and test me. My sword is itching for blood." This made the poor men shiver in fear. Zoro then looked at Luffy and said, "But if I am to join you, I have my own goals." "Which is?" Robin asked as she twisted the spine of one Marine, making every one of them cringe at the sound of bone cracking. "I'm going to be the greatest swordsman in the world, and there is no stopping me. If you get in my way, you'll answer to my blade, got that?" Although Robin frowned at the threat a little, Luffy said, "Greatest swordsman, huh? A pirate king can't ask for any less." "Pirate king?" Zoro asked as he flung the Marines off him like a bunch of rag dolls. He then looked at Robin and said, "So what? You're his pirate queen?" This caused the girl's face to redden considerably. Morgan fumed, seeing the people who dared to defy him, causally speaking, and roared at his men, "Go, and attack them." The men nodded their heads and ran again towards the teens. Zoro quickly blocked them all, and said, "Man, you guys are weak." "What kind of human being is he?" one man asked while trembling in front of the proclaimed man-demon. "How can he be this strong after everything he went through?" another questioned. "He's not normal, he's a monster, what can we do?" This banter caused Kobe's heart to break as he watched his heroes cry like little girls afraid of the dark. Luffy then began to run at full speed and jumped in the air. Robin had some foresight and yelled at Zoro, "Zoro, duck." The green-haired swordsman blinked in confusion, but seeing the straw hat-wearing teen in the air smiling caused him to take her warning seriously. Zoro then ducked as Luffy yelled, "Gum gum." The rubber boy then proceeded to stretch his leg to outside the yard, making the Marines gape at him. Whip. The boy then retracted his leg to his side, causing it to extend like a whip, entangling the marine soldiers with it, rocketing them aside. Zoro could only blink at first and asked, "What in the world are you?" "I'm a rubber man. I ate the gum-gum fruit," Luffy said, stretching his face. Robin then interjected saying, "And in case you're wondering, I ate the hana fruit, which allows me to sprout any part of my body as long as I can see it." Zoro then scratched his head saying, "So I guess you two are a couple of demons roaming the earth." This caused them both to laugh. The marine captain was now foaming at the mouth as he yelled at his men, "What are you morons doing? Go attack them, you weaklings. There are only 3 of them and tens of you," he said, lifting his axe, daring anyone not to obey. One brave soul said, "No way, sir." He then looked at him, "These people aren't human." "Yeah, the pirate hunter is weakened and we can't stop him," another said. "Even the girl is unbelievably strong." Kobe looked at them with misty eyes, ready to cry. He felt his reality slowly shattering around him. First, he got to learn the Marines aren't as holy as he thought, and now this. For the last 2 years, he lived dreaming of the heroes of justice. The Marines. Now, he looks at them, are they them? Deep inside of his heart, a small part of Kobe died. Zoro frowned saying, "Man, they're so pathetic right now, almost making me feel bad fighting them." He then tied his bandana around his head, saying again, remembering all the pain he had been put through during the previous half-month, almost. Luffy then said, "They're seriously weak." "I do agree with you, Luffy, these Marines aren't fit to fight a cat," Robin added. Morgan began to huff and puff through his nose, and looked at his men, and said, "If there's anything I hate more than insubordination, it's weakness." He then yelled, "I won't have weakness in my ranks." He then gave an order that made even the pirate trio cringe, "Everyone who won't fight, kill them yourselves." Kobe then looked astonished at the Marines. These people are supposed to be hardened warriors who fight for all that is right. Now they look like a bunch of toddlers. He then felt something in him at a fast rate. Angry and rage, and he wasn't the only one having those feelings. In a blink, Luffy ran across the yard, passing the girl and the swordsman, making his toward the Marines who were slowly picking up their guns and pointing them to their heads. He then yelled, "Gum Gum Whip." He then repeated the same attack from earlier, plowing through the Marines, throwing them to the side, saving them from their own cowardliness. He then looked at the captain with eyes full of anger. Luffy printed towards him at full speed, throwing a mean right hook toward the axe-handed captain. The man, luckily for him, raised his axe just in time to protect his face from the blow, but was pushed a little for the force. Morgan was shocked at how this incredibly skinny teen packed quite the him to rage more. "You are nothing, you hear me?" he yelled the boy, only for a voice to cut him. "Luffy," Kobe screamed at the top of his lungs. This made the straw-hatted boy look at him. "Take this disgrace of a Marine down," he told the straw hat boy, who smiled at him. Morgan growled as his pride couldn't allow this to play one anymore. Morgan then yelled, "You are all nothing but worthless, insubordinate trash." He threw off his jacket and said, "I'm Captain Axe Hand Morgan, and my word is the law. My authority is absolute." Luffy looked at the hulking man with an unimpressed look, having fought bigger, and said, "Hello, Mr. Axe Hand, I'm Luffy." Luffy gave him a heavy punch, but the man shielded himself with his axe, causing the boy to jump back. The man then tried to swipe at Luffy with his namesake, only for the boy to jump in the air, avoiding it, and landing back on the ground unharmed. This caused the captain to growl like a caged animal. The man then went to send a series of attacks on the boy, each one avoided gracefully by the latter. Morgan was now reaching a critical point, as he ran screaming like a maniac, saying, "Die!" he screamed as he delivered a vertical swipe at the boy, aiming to split him in half. Luffy once again dodged by jumping to the side, and sent a heavy punch into the man's face, making him fall back to the ground. The man looked surprised, as if he never accepted this to happen. He then raged, "You dare to hit me?" Luffy then replied causally, "Yeah sure," only making the crazy captain angrier. The man then ran and said again, "Die, you filthy ass." "Yeah, but no thanks," the boy said. Morgan then threw a horizontal swipe at the boy. Luffy then jumped into the air, spinning around a little, and delivered a devastating kick, combining his strength and momentum, to the man's metal jaw, throwing him off balance and sending him flying into the ground. The Marines were simply gaping at this unnatural scene. Captain Morgan was known for his strength. That's why no one dared to stand in his way or dare to question him, or anything he did. And along came this boy, and began to beat all black and blue. Was Morgan's reign of terror coming to an end? They can only hope so. Luffy then slowly made his toward the downed captain and grabbed him by the scruff of his shirt and began to beat him. Luffy gave punch after punch as he yelled at him, "What is wrong with you?" The boy then delivered a vicious headbutt before continuing to punch him, and said, "You're making Kobe's dream into a joke." As this vicious beatdown was going, a scream grabbed everyone's attention, "Hey!" Everyone then looked to see Helmeppo grabbing Kobe and pushing a gun to his head. The spoiled boy then screamed, "Straw Hat! Leave my dad alone and don't you dare lay a finger on him." Robin then slowly began to raise her arms, readying herself to free her friend, only for the blonde teen to say, "Stop right there. I know all about your tricks, Miss Hansy. One more move and I'll blow his brain into the ground," he said, causing her to lower her arms with a frown. "Yeah, that's right. Now get away from my dad," he said as Luffy slowly retired from Morgan, but then Kobe screamed at the rubber man, "No, Luffy, don't stop. Take down this monster of a captain. Don't worry about me. I'm willing to die for my dream." The blonde boy then smacked the back of his gun into Kobe's head and told him, "Be silent." He then looked at Luffy and said, "If you don't back now, I swear I'll kill him," though everyone saw how he was shaking and highly doubted that. Noticing the looks, he said, "I truly will." Kobe then looked at the boy. He saw the gun shaking and knew that this guy was all talk. He can't take his life. Hell, he can't take anyone's life. Helmeppo then looked at Kobe and said, "Where are you looking at? Stay quiet or else." Kobe then felt something snap inside him. He couldn't just stand idle and see his dream get ruined by someone like this guy. He looked him straight in the eye, causing the boy to say, "What the?" He didn't have the time to continue as Kobe delivered a serious mean right hook to the boy's face, sending him to the ground. The teen then screamed, "My nose, you just broke my nose." Kobe then went down on him screaming, "I don't care. This is your entire fault." Kobe then began to deliver a series of punches to the spoiled boy. He howled in agony as he said, "The Marines are supposed to help people, not hurt them." He stopped, but he then continued his assault on the blonde, saying, "But you people ruined everything, you hear me? Everything?" Kobe then let a few sobs go through as he screamed, "You people are so sick, you make pirates like good." Helmeppo, having had enough of this, then shoved Kobe off of him, saying, "Who the hell cares about this?" He then pressed the gun again to Kobe's head, only to see that the Straw Hat Boy coming toward him, so he yelled at him, "Stop." The boy didn't listen. This caused the panicked teen to yell again, "Stop or I'll shoot him." Just like last time, he didn't listen and continued walking. During this time, Morgan came back to his feet and screamed like a madman, "I'm Captain Morgan and you'll all die today." He then ran toward Luffy, raising his axe. Zoro, fast as ever, reacted quickly, readying an attack as Luffy was doing at the same time. Luffy screamed, "Gum Gum Pistol," flying a punch toward Helmeppo as Zoro threw his blades toward Morgan. In a single moment, both the father and the son were down for the count, as Luffy's fist connected with Helmeppo's and Zoro's slashed Morgan. Luffy then looked at Zoro and said, "Nice work, Zoro." Zoro replied back at him, "Just doing my job, Captain." This caused the team to smile, knowing that Zoro was officially in the crew. A brief moment of silence passed, and then Luffy said, "So this is it?" Robin told him, "It depends if the Marines are still planning to fight." Zoro then said, "Let them bring it on." The Marines stood there with an unreadable expression, until they all burst into cheers and tears of joy. "Thank the heavens. He's gone. Morgan was finally defeated, we can't believe it. The monster's gone. Quickly arrest him before he wakes him." Robin then said, "It would appear that even his men didn't like him that much." Zoro then stated, "Can't imagine why." He then fell to the ground, causing both Robin and Luffy to run toward him. "Zoro, are you alright?" Luffy asked, concerned for his new crewmate. He didn't want him to die yet. They haven't even started adventures for him to die. Yeah, I'm fine," but he was interrupted by his stomach growling, "I'm so hungry." This made all three begin laughing. Luffy then held Zoro up and was about to take him to Rika's mother's restaurant till something stopped him. A soft sniffling sound brought everyone's attention to Kobe rolling into a ball and crying softly. The Straw Hat Boy, Scholar, and Swordsman felt their heart go out to him. It wasn't exactly the most pleasurable thing seeing how the world actually works and having your entire reality shatter around you like a house of glass hit by a rock. Robin went over to Kobe's side and started to gently rub his back, trying to comfort him. Kobe looked at Robin and saw a very soft and warm smile on her face. She then said, "It's all right, Kobe. I know it's hard on you. Let it all out," she told him, like a mother would do her own son. Kobe then let his emotions flow as he held on to Robin, who sat down beside him, telling him that everything is going to be okay. Luffy and Zoro only bowed their heads, understanding the boy's pain. Each of them had a very unpleasant way of knowing how the world truly works. It was never pleasant, and it will never be. Meanwhile, up inside the Marines Tower, a certain orange-haired woman was making her way toward the captain's office, using the fight down there as a distraction. Once she reached it, she noticed two guards standing in front of it, causing her to curse her luck. She then saw something that made her smile. In just a few moments, she switched fit. She walked toward the guards and said, "Captain Morgan just defeated the prisoners and wants you to go down and collect them." The guards then shrugged and went to do as told, but they stopped as they realized something, that they had never seen this girl's face before. One of them asked her, "Excuse, but do I know you?" The girl panicked, but kept her cool and said, "No, I'm a new recruit here." The other one looked suspiciously as he said, "Really? Then show me your papers." "Okay," the girl said as she opened her shirt, showing a little bit of her chest, making both men blush. Using their current state, She quickly wiped a staff from under her skirt and them both with it saying, "Men, they're all the same." Bringing a bunch of ropes, she then proceeded to tie them up. "You're not going to get." One was speaking but was cut off when the girl stuffed a paper in his mouth, causing him and his friend to mumble unclearly, making the girl roll her eyes. She then went into the office and saw her prize. The safe. In just moments, she was able to open it and took its contents, which were a map. She opened it happy to see she finally got what she wanted, but her face turned sour when she read it. "Sorry, but I took the map." She read it. At the end of the letter a clown face was present. The girl then hissed angrily, "Buggy." She had heard about the crazy pirate clown who'd kill his entire crew rather than have his treasure stolen. She sighed. It would appear that she had another stop to make to get her prize. Back at Rika's mother's restaurant, the celebration was in full swing as people were happy with the fall of the disgraced Marine captain. One man, in particular, was eating like a beast, causing him to receive all kinds of looks. "Wow," Zoro said as he smacked his stomach, "man, 3 weeks on that pole made me forget who food tastes like." He then looked at Luffy shoveling down his throat all a bottomless pit. His sweat dropped as he said, "How in hell are you eating more than me?" "Well, you see," Robin was about to explain until Luffy stopped her saying, "Don't mind her. I'm just hungry." He then gave Robin an annoyed look because she was about to reveal one of his greatest secrets, to which the girl only giggled. Zoro saw the weird interaction, but decided not to push further. Simply it wasn't his business to know. He then looked at Rika's mother and said, "You know, I hope we aren't causing any trouble," he said, looking at the bowls of food he just finished, combined with Robin's sandwich, Luffy's monster appetite, and Kobe's small juice cup. He felt that they were overdoing it. "What?" the woman said, surprised. "No way, it's the least we can do for taking down that monster Morgan," she told him, waving her hand, which made the man smile since they weren't pushing it. Luffy then looked at Robin and said, "Robin, did you ask them for supplies?" "I did, Luffy, and right now they're loading our boats with supplies. Plus I made sure to bring a lot of meat," she said, making the boy give a small peck on the cheek. Zoro scoffed and said, "Man, I jumped on the wrong boat," while Kobe only blushed. While Rika was confused, her mother smiled and said with a smile, "Young love." Zoro then shook his head, returning to the matter at hand, and said, "You said you wanted to be the Pirate King, right?" "Yes, I'll definitely become the King of Pirates," Luffy said, full of conviction in his voice, impressing Zoro, while Rika, who was listening, looked at him with awe. "Okay, then you must have a huge crew," Zoro said, only to receive the mother of all slaps at Luffy's next statement. "No, only us," he said casually, then asked Rika to bring more food. Zoro blinked a little as he tried to process what he heard. "Wait for a little," he said as he massaged his temples. "So you're planning to become Pirate King and you have no crew whatsoever?" "Yup. So it's only you," he said, pointing at Luffy, her, pointing at Robin, and me, he finished, pointing to himself. "Pretty much yes," he said, smiling, making Robin giggle at his goofy antics. "What boat did I decide to join?" he groaned, then asked, "At least tell me you have a boat." Robin then said, "Of course, we do." She then pointed at the docks. When Zoro looked, unimpressed would be an understatement regarding how he felt right now. At the docks, a small boat was bobbing against the waves, filled with 6 barrels and a huge stack of books. And to add to the appealing sight was a dog peeing on it. "What did I get myself into?" the man asked himself, as he slammed his head on the table, but then said, "But it's already too late to back out now." "Don't worry, Zoro. We'll bring a bigger boat eventually," Luffy said enthusiastically. Robin then added, "Indeed, if our crew continued to grow, we'll eventually need a big vessel to carry us." Zoro sighed and said, "Somehow that isn't making me feel any better." Then all three began to laugh at this. Rika then came back with a huge bunch of sandwiches for Luffy, which he shared with Robin, but then the little girl started to shuffle her feet and looked at Luffy. She then asked the boy, "Did you say you're going to become a pirate?" Luffy smiled and said, "You bet I am, and not any pirate, but not any pirate. I'll become the King of Pirates." He screamed at the top of his lungs, making the girl beamed at him. "That's so cool," the little girl squealed with awe. Robin couldn't help but smile at the girl's spirit. It reminded her of herself when she was younger. The girl then stopped and looked at Robin, giving the older girl a very bad feeling. She then asked with excitement, "Then you must be the Queen of Pirates, right?" The effect was immediate as Robin's face became so red she couldn't be mistaken for red pepper, while Luffy's entire body froze. Even Kobe spit out his juice through nostrils when he heard the question. Zoro, on the other hand, was having a field day. Seeing the couple that frustrated him so much get so flustered, especially the woman having her demeanor crack, was a reward for all his torture. He didn't get to enjoy the effect when he said it on the battlefield, so this was compensation. The couple then looked at each other, causing their faces to redden even more, making them look away from each other. Then Robin quickly began to stutter. You see," she said, while Zoro was laughing so hard at her side, he was having a hard time breathing. Luffy then overcame his embarrassment as he hugged Robin's side and said, "Of course, what kind of pirate king will I be without my queen?" he declared, baldly, making Robin hide her face in his shirt while whining, "Luffy, stop, this is embarrassing." Rika was about to ask a second question when her mother came to Robin's rescue and said, "Rika, what I told you about meddling in people's personal lives. That's it is not nice." "Exactly, fine, but you said you're going to be a pirate, so are you going to the Grand Line?" the girl asked happily. Robin thanked every deity she knew of to the change of subject and said, "Well, of course, did you ever hear of it?" "Yeah," the girl screamed but then piped down with a blush on her face for her outburst as she said, "Mama always told me stories about it. That it has a mind of its own. She also said that the weather act like it wants and that the only person that had ever to go through it was Gold Roger." Both teens then remembered Ace and smiled. Luffy then said, "And soon you won't be the only person to go through it. I'll become the new king of pirates." Luffy then felt something was seriously off. He was kinda expecting something to happen. He scratched his head for a little then smacked his fist into his palm. He looked at Kobe and said, "Oi Kobe, isn't this part where you jump and start saying that's it is impossible and stuff?" Kobe laughed a little but was seriously off and everyone can sense it. "No, Luffy. You proved that you can do anything at this point to me." Robin looked at Kobe and asked him as gently as possible, "Kobe, what's wrong?" "Nothing, it's just that when I was captured with luffywhat the Marines are the heroes of the world. They are only there to protect people. Actually, dreaming of becoming a Marine is what kept me sane during my imprisonment if you want to call it that. But now," he said with a sad voice, "after I saw what the Marines truly are, I guess my dream will always be a dream." A haunting silence filled the entire restaurant. Rika and her mom frowned at the boy's broken words. Robin felt her heart break seeing Kobe in such a devastating state. Even Luffy and Zoro, who both were as blunt as a mallet, felt bad for him. Suddenly everyone looked at the doors when a troop of Marines entered the place, causing Zoro to say, "I have a bad feeling about this." The captain of the troops moved forward and stood looking in the little restaurant, eyeing everyone. He then looked at the pirate trio and their companion and said, "On behalf of the residents of Shell's Island, I thank you for taking down Captain Morgan and ending his reign of terror." Luffy tried to say, "Oh, no," but he was cut off by the captain who said, "But are you by any chance pirates?" This caused Zoro to reach to his swords, knowing where this was going. Yes, we are pirates," Luffy said as blunt as ever. "I see," the captain said as he stroked his chin. He then added, "In that case, I'm afraid I have to arrest you three." This caused many people to gasp and begin shouting, "Hi, what's wrong with you? You can't treat our hero like that." "Yeah, he saved us. You're just as bad as Morgan." Kobe was shell-shocked. What in the world is wrong with the place? Can they get more crooked? Luffy just saved the entire island and they want to arrest him. What is wrong with them? "Silence," the captain yelled, causing any arguments to be silenced quickly. "But as a gesture of our gratitude, we'll allow you to leave and not tell the higher-ups. But you must leave now." "Okay," Luffy said. Kobe jumped on his feet and said, "Just like that." Luffy shrugged as he said, "Well, we're pirates after all." Zoro then stood up saying, "Rubber Brain got a point." Robin followed him saying, "Don't call him that." As the three walked outside the restaurant, the captain stopped Luffy and pointed at Kobe, and asked him, "Isn't he with you?" Luffy looked at Kobe and said, "What? He's a coward but is a decent navigator. That's all he is good for, so no, he's not with me." Kobe felt so hurt that Luffy said, his friend just insulted him in front of everyone, denying all types of relations with him. Why? Then it occurred to him, how is going to be a Marine if he's associated with pirates? Luffy was doing him a. But he was the foot chair of that whale of the pirate named Alvida, he said, causing Kobe's world to shatter around him. Luffy then went on to emphasize how big Alvida was by stretching his arms. Luffy then looked at Kobe and said, he used to always do what you wanted, and if he didn't he'd get beat up till he's black and blue. Kobe asked him as he approached him, "Luffy, what are saying?" only to be flicked by Luffy. The older boy then continued flicking and said, "You're nothing but a pushover. A little pushover who always did whatever he was told." Kobe felt something twitch as Luffy continued flicking him. It felt like Luffy thought he can do whatever he wanted with him and get away with it. "You know you make a good punching bag too," Luffy said as he smiled. If anyone wants to go and beat someone, they directly come to the useless pushover punching bag Kobe and beat him. At this point, Kobe had had enough. He punched Luffy and screamed, "I'm no one's punching bag." He felt so alive. That was until Luffy related by slugging him so hard he went flying outside the restaurant. Luffy then sat on the boy and continued hitting him as he said, "You think you can hit me and get away with it? I'm a pirate who can do whatever he wants." The captain then emerged and shouted at Luffy, "Stop this, or I will arrest you on the spot." He then said, "He's clearly no friend of yours, so leave this island." Luffy grinned and said, "Okay, bye now." He then ran to follow the other two. Kobe looked at him as he ran. He felt so hurt. It felt like Luffy was doing everything to alienate him. To make it look like they weren't friends in the first place. It then hit him. Kobe then stood up and walked to the captain. "Sir, I would like to enlist myself to the Marines. I want to offer any type of help possible." The captain, stunned by the boy's sudden change of behavior, arched an eyebrow, but a soldier came up and said, "Sir, this could be a trap." Pirates are known to plant spies in the Marines. The captain, however, disagreed with his Marines. The boy looked earnest, and he personally saw how sad he was when he saw Morgan's corruption. This boy had potential, something that the Marines needed in their ranks. He then looked at him with strong eyes and said, "Boy, joining the Marines ain't a picnic. There's a lot of training, shedding tears, sweat, and blood. And with the right amount of power you can then be deemed Marine material. Even then, you still have a long way to go." Kobe flinched a little, but steadied himself saying, "I'm ready for everything, sir." The captain then said, "Then get ready. You have a long way ahead of you. No backing now." Kobe could only smile at that. Back at the docks, Luffy joined Robin and Zoro in the boat. As Luffy sat, Zoro asked him, "So do you think that little stunt of you worked?" Luffy looked at him and smiled. "From I was able to hear, I think so." Zoro then looked at Robin and asked, "Did you know?" Robin said as she snuggled into Luffy, "Of course. How was Kobe was going to be a Marine if he was known to be friends with pirates? It makes sense to comfort him like that." Zoro then said, "What if he hated you?" Luffy smiled and said, "Can't be helped. And if you ever see him again, then he has to bring his top game," he said as he kicked the boat off the docks and started sailing into the distance. As they began to make their way away from the docks, they saw the entire Marine base with Kobe, Rika, and her mom standing on the docks. The captain of the Marines then said, "Men, salute," and in a few moments, the entire Marine base was saluting the pirates. Zoro then said, "Marines saluting pirates. You don't see that every day." Robin then added, "Well, with Luffy, you're in for a bunch of surprises." "Luffy!" A shout came from the docks. The boy looked only to see Kobe shouting to him, "I know what you did to me, and I won't waste the chance you gave me, thanks for everything." Luffy then smiled and started to wave heavily at them, with Robin gently lifting her hand and waving goodbye, and Zoro just raising his hand in acknowledgement. Back on the docks, Kobe was cleaning his eyes when the Marine captain said, "You know good friends are hard to find these days. You're lucky, my boy." Kobe looked at the captain, who smiled at him, also knowing what Luffy did for the boy. The captain then said, "Saluting to pirates is an offense to the Marines. Our punishment is that we don't have food for the next 3 days. Got that?" "Yes, sir," everyone replied. Kobe felt pride travel through him as he looked at Luffy. He silently made a promise that the next time they meet, he will a person strong enough to face the future pirate king. They all then watched the pirate trio sail into the distance. The crafty cat thief, after the pirate trio left Shell's Island to begin the trip, they were all filled with excitement. More precisely, the pirate couple was filled with excitement while Zoro was simply being Zoro. It had been 2 days since they sailed into the wide sea, and things were beginning to become a little bit. "I'm bored," Luffy whined as he slammed his head against the railings of their small vessel. He then looked at Robin, who was reading a book. "How much more till we get to the Grand Line?" The girl hummed as she put a hand to her chin. "I think about a week or so." Luffy then slammed his head once more into the railing and continued to groan. Zoro, who was asleep all this while, woke from his slumber and yawned. He then looked over to Luffy and said, "Be patient. We can't go to the Grand Line in this ship. We'd get creamed quickly." Robin then said as she was still reading in her book, "You know, Luffy, he's right. This ship isn't Grand Line worthy." The boy then looked at her with a sad, pouty face that made her heart melt, so she said as she put her book aside next to the big pile she already had, "Come on, Luffy, tell me, what are the crew members you're planning to get?" She asked him, knowing how passionate he is about his dreams. Luffy then smiled at that and said, "Well, we need a cook, doctor, and definitely a musician." Zoro looked at him like he was crazy. He then looked at Robin, who was smiling brightly, and asked, "He's serious, isn't he?" Robin nodded, causing Zoro to say, "We don't need a musician." Luffy looked offended. "What? How can we be pirates without a musician to sing for our parties?" Zoro could only sweat drop at that logic. He then groaned out loud, "Man, what did I do to earn this torture?" Both Luffy and Robin then began chuckling at the swordsman's expense. "You're funny, Zoro," Luffy said between laughs. "Yeah, whatever," Zoro said. He was then interrupted as a loud rambling sound made its way toward his ears. He looked and saw Luffy bent over with his hands on his stomach. The boy then whined, "Man, I'm now bored and hungry." Zoro looked at him and felt his own stomach complaining, so he said, "Funny, this is coming from the guy who ate our entire food supply yesterday." "I couldn't help it," the rubber boy began, and then continued, "I was really hungry." "Then control yourself next time," Zoro yelled at him. Zoro knew that boarding with them was going to be a pain, but this was a whole new level. "Well, there is no backing now," he said to himself. Zoro then said, "Maybe we should have stayed a couple more days there. We could have prepared properly. The villagers seemed kind enough." Robin looked at the swordsman and let out a sigh. "I presume you're right. We could have spent an extra day there to get more supplies." She stopped a little, and then added, "But it couldn't be helped. The Marines gathered themselves quite quickly. It was the logical decision to make at the time. She knew if they stayed a little longer then they could have brought more food. But she was stunned at the fast rate the Marines were back on their feet. She was also grateful that they allowed them to leave, for the marine sake that is. She looked at Luffy and felt her heart break seeing him in such pain. She grabbed him from behind and started rubbing his back and told him, "No worries Luffy, on the next island we come at. I'll let you eat whatever you want," she said as she gave him a peck on his cheek. The boy looked at her with a small smile and said, "Thanks, Robin." Zoro looked at them and blinked. Those two might be the weirdest, but who was he to judge? He uses a third sword in his mouth. He then shook his head and looked at Robin and said, "Yeah, by the way, how much longer till we get there?" Robin only replied by raising her eyebrow and said, "Excuse me." Zoro then scratched his head in confusion, and proceeded to ask again, "How much till we get to the next island?" "Why would you ask me that?" Robin replied, confusing him again. Zoro hummed, and then his eyes blew wide open. "Were you two sailing around and about without a navigator?" Both the boy and the girl replied quickly, "Yes." Zoro then slumped over, before lifting himself and looking at Robin as he mumbled to himself, "And here I thought with you reading all those books you have you'd take yous everywhere no problem." Robin, who heard him, couldn't blame him for feeling disappointed or shocked. She herself was also shocked given that she never took into account learning how to navigate. She was focused on her dream that she forget to learn other basic things. Robin then replied to him, shocking him that she heard him, "Well, to be honest, I should have read more books about sailing and navigation, but I was always a history lover myself." She finished, but then an epiphany made its way into her head. "But about you, Mr. Bounty." She then remembered something as she corrected herself, "Sorry, I mean ex-bounty hunter. Surely you must have some navigational abilities to go after your targets." Zoro then scratched his moss green hair and said, "Well, I assume you'd think so, but no, I don't have," he said, causing her to give him a look demanding an explanation, so he elaborated more. "Honestly, I just used to hunt down bounties near my home, but other than that I was just following my gut," he said as he laid back. Robin on the other hand said, "So basically what you are trying to say is that you lost your way home and just went on bounty hunting?" Zoro looked offended and gave her a scowl. "What, no, my sense of direction is fine, or at least very good for that matter." Robin couldn't help but laugh, noticing that she hit a sore spot. The sound of groaning brought her mind back to her boyfriend as she went back to soothing him. Zoro couldn't help but notice the irony of the situation that he was in, so he said out loud, "I still can't wrap my head around this. One day I was a bounty hunter. Now I am the thing that I used to hunt for a living." He then looked at Luffy and said, "And my captain is a child at best." He then looked at Robin and added, "No offense though." Robin raised her hand, "None taken. I know that my Luffy isn't the type that strikes people as the commanding type." She stopped as she remembered the first time he met her, how he stood up to protect from the bullies, saving her island from destruction, fighting his brother for her, but that what makes him special, nice. She also remembered their first kiss and his reaction, and absolutely lovable. Luffy looked at her and said, "I love you too, Robin." He then proceeded to hug her as Zoro rolled his eyes in amusement. Suddenly the wind blew harshly and managed to take Luffy's straw hat off his hand, causing the boy to go into a panic. "Oh, no, my hat is going to go away." Luckily for him, the hat managed to land the sails of the ship. "My hat," Luffy whimpered as he looked at it. Robin then tapped him on the back and said, "Don't worry Luffy, I'll bring back." She then crossed her arms and sprouted one arm beside the hat. But due to the wind and the sudden motion, the hat flew upwards along with the sail. Robin frowned as the hit went higher every time she tried to grab it. Now the hat was on the edge of the sail, any higher and it would be lost forever. Luffy then looked in despair at the hat as it flew off the sails. He was going to jump to catch when the boat suddenly shook violently. He looked only to see Zoro in the air grabbing his hat. The man then landed back on the deck of the vessel and handed him his hat back. The boy smiled brightly at him and said, "Zoro, you're a lifesaver." Zoro just grinned as he said, "Yeah, no problem." He then looked at Luffy, who was grabbing his hat and putting it on his head, tapping the old thing as if to make sure she won't come off again. He was very intrigued about this obsession, so he asked, "I bet this hat has a very interesting story behind for to care about so much." Luffy smiled at Zoro and said, "It's a sign of a promise I made with Shanks when gave it to me to become that. I will return it to him." Zoro listened to his captain as he spoke and initially said, "So this hat is given to you temporarily by this Shanks." Suddenly Zoro started working and began collecting the dots together, as he finally asked, "By Shanks? You don't mean the red-haired pirate Shanks?" "Yeah, that's him." Zoro's mind went blank. This kid knows a pirate of that caliber. Maybe he wasn't giving enough credit. Zoro then shook his head and said, "Captain, you sure are full of surprises." He then looked at Robin and said, "Something tells me that the first you lovebirds met was just as exciting and weird." The girl only smiled at him. Suddenly Luffy bowed again on the deck and started whining, "I'm hungry." Robin smiled and began ruffling his hair, telling him that he'll eat once they reach a new island. Kara. They suddenly heard a cry from above them. Once they looked up, they could barely make the figure of a bird flying above them. Smiling, Luffy then began stretching his arms backward and looked up to the sky as he said, "Guys, breakfast on me." He then launched himself off the boat and soared into the sky. He then caught his meal, or better yet the meal caught him. What surprised the rubber boy was, not only the bird was larger than him, but it caught him in its beak. He began yelling, "Let go of me, you damn bird." Back in the boat, Robin screamed, "Luffy," as Zoro began to row after him, but asked her, "Can't you grab with your power?" Robin sighed then frowned as said with distaste, "It's not as easy as that. To use my power, I need to have a clear vision of what I want to grab and they had to be in my range." "Wonderful. Let's keep rowing after our captain now," Zoro said while putting his muscles to the test. "Help!" A sudden cry came from the ocean. The two pirates then saw three men fighting against the waves, so Zoro said, "Hop on. We can't stop." As the boat passed the three, they jumped onto it. One was a lanky man who wore a hat on his head. Another was also a lanky man with orange hair looking like a clown. The last was a chubby man. Zoro then said, "Wow, that was a close one. Good thing we came in time to help you guys." "Yeah, thanks," Clown Hair said. "Now," the hat-wearing pirate continued, "hand over this boat." The chubby guy said. Robin raised an eyebrow while Zoro simply grabbed one of his swords. Those 3 moments later were beaten into a bloody pulp. Currently, the boat now was being rowed by Hathead and the chubby pirate with Clownhead sitting between them as he began to speak. "Please excuse our earlier behavior. We wouldn't have done anything like that if we knew you were the famous pirate hunter Zoro along with such a lovely maiden." The now 3 pirates covered in bruises all laughed in agreement. Zoro merely looked at them with disdain. "Keep rowing or I will throw the fish in the sea, got it?" The 3 began to row the boat even faster now. Zoro sighed. "Great, now thanks to the 3 morons, we lost sight of our captain." This caused them to increase their speed, afraid of what punishment they might receive. Robin then stood up and walked past the 3 who moved out of her way. They were still afraid of the arms she sprouted, and honestly, they didn't want to know how she did that. "It's that way," she said as she pointed in the distance. Zoro looked at her unconvinced and asked, "Are you sure?" To which she nodded. He then turned to the 3 morons. "Now, you heard the lady start rowing like your life depend on it. And mostly it does." He finished as he slowly began to bring out his sword. The 3 began to row the boat faster than ever. But Clownhair looked behind at the direction they were going at. He smiled and said, "Sure." His friends caught on and began to smile themselves. Zoro and Robin merely raised an eyebrow at this. Over at a small town known as Orange Town, a chase was happening on its streets. The chase consisted of 3 individuals, a girl with ginger hair running with a huge sack on her back. She wore a navy-like t-shirt and a small yellow skirt with circles on it. Chasing her were 2 pirates wearing clothes that mostly belonged to the circus. The girl ran as fast as her legs can carry her, cursing her luck. She looked around for any kind of route to escape her pursuers. Suddenly, as she was running, she tripped on her pebble on the ground, causing her to fall over on the cobble street and skid for a bit. When she stopped, she looked at her arms to see if there were any injuries and grumbled, "Damn it." She then heard laughter behind and looked at the source and gulped. Well, looks like your luck finally run out," he said as he brandished a sword in front of her, but then he looked her up and down, and then continued, "But how about we have a little fun, and I might let you live?" She paled at the implications and started to look around for a possible escape. She was on the ground surrounded and with no way out. She looked in the sky hoping for a miracle. She then heard a loud cry, causing her to ask herself if her calls were answered, and some heavenly force intervened to help her. She then heard the cry become closer and closer, then she looked up and saw something falling from the sky, but as she squinted her eyes, she could barely make the sight of a familiar straw hat. The figure then collided into the ground between her and her pursuers, causing a huge cloud of dust and small rocks to fall all around. Then a voice from the dust said, "Wow, that was a close one." She wiped her eyes and looked as the dust cleared. She was able to see a boy of all things. She could swear he didn't look older than her. And how did he survive such a fall? She honestly didn't care as an idea hit her on the spot. She stood up and with a fake smile made her way up to the boys and said with a happy tone, "Boss, you made after all." The boy looked at her in confusion. "Do I?" The girl cut him off as she continued speaking. "Now boss, I already got what you want, so please be gentlemen and handle those fellows for me." Luffy now was extremely confused. First, he gets taken by a bird, and then gets shot from the sky, and finally, this girl who he had never seen says he's her boss. Luffy then spoke, "Hey, but I don't know." The girl chuckled as she told him, "Stay safe," and then began to run away, leaving the 3 men to stand over in confusion. The 2 pirates blinked a little, but one of them said, "Come on, let's grab him." His friend looked at him in confusion and asked, "What about the girl?" "Forget about her. We got her, boss. Captain Buggy will be overjoyed when he knows we captured him. And we'll find her later." The 2 pirates then looked over to the boy and readied themselves. Luffy, on the other hand, was blissfully unaware of what was going on, so he walked up to the 2 men and asked them, "Do you know who she is?" He then felt his stomach growl in hunger, so he then asked them again, "Do you know where I can find something to eat?" One of the pirates smiled at him. "How about you eat a knuckle sandwich?" he said as he threw his hand at Luffy's face. The punch didn't as much as faze Luffy, but it did do something. Luffy watched as his hat slowly fell from his head, and peacefully flew to the ground. When it finally hit the ground, he looked back at the two pirates with a look that screamed bloody murder, and then the screaming began. The orange-haired ran as fast as her feet can carry away from the scene. When she felt she was far away from the location, she stopped and began trying to take a breath. As she set down the sack she was carrying, she looked around when she noticed no one was around. She sat down for a bit to relax. She smiled to herself thinking about the clever way she managed to outsmart the pirates. But she then felt a twinge of guilt remembering the boy she left behind. She quickly tried to squash that feeling, reminding herself that she is now closer to her goal, and this wasn't the first time she threw someone in her head so she can escape. But this voice became stronger with each paw attempt to put it to rest. She began climbing the house to see what happened to him. Once she reached the top, she began hearing screaming coming from down below. She cringed a little and said, "Geez, they're really giving it to him, aren't they?" The moment she looked over the side of the house, she was met with a bizarre sight. Instead of the boy being a bloody pulp on the ground, the man was on the ground groaning in pain and anguish. The boy then made his way to his hat, and put it tightly on his head, as he said darkly, "Never touch my hat ever again." "Wow, you're really strong. You beat them all," a voice from behind him called out. Luffy looked and saw it was the girl from earlier. "Ah, it's you. No thanks to you. You threw right into their arms," he said. "I'm sorry," the girl apologetically waved her hands, but then said, "Let's start over." The girl then pointed at herself and said, "I'm Nami, and I like money and tangerine." Luffy looked at her and said, "I'm Luffy." Nami jumped from the roof to the ground and walked up to him and said, "Sorry about earlier, but I thought you were really strong to handle them." She lied, hoping for him to buy it. "Okay," he merely replied. "Okay," she said, and then asked, "Now that that's out of the way, how about we actually become partners? We'll become filthy rich in no time." "No," Luffy simply replied, and then said, "But nice meeting you." Nami blinked a little in shock, but then shook her head as she said, "Hey, wait a little bit. At least give it a thought." "No, not really," he said. "Why would I think about something I don't want?" Nami was about to retort when the boy fell to the ground and groaned. "Is something wrong? I'm hungry," he replied. She then smiled devilishly as an idea came into her head. "Well, if you can stand up, I can take you somewhere to eat." Luffy then jumped on his feet and said, "Really, thanks." Nami's sweat dropped at the sudden change but didn't say anything. Now at a house, Luffy sat patiently waiting for his meal. Moments later, Nami came out of the kitchen with a plate full of sandwiches in her hand. She put it in front of Luffy and said, "Dig in." Not needing to be told twice, he quickly began munching away. He then looked at Nami and said, "Is this your house?" He stopped for a bit before saying, "And thank you for the food." He spoke, spraying some crumbs onto Nami. Nami said while wiping her face, "First, don't talk while eating." She then added, "Second, no, this is not my house." The entire town was deserted when the buggy pirates invaded the island. Luffy then looked at her with confusion, ignoring her first demand. "Then how did you get in?" Grumbling under her breath for the Straw Hat Boy's lack of manner, she said, "I found a way in. I'm a thief, so this is kinda my thing." The boy simply nodded his head, before looking at her and saying, "So you're a thief? So you definitely steal from people and stuff, right?" "Nope, I only steal from pirates," she declared proudly, before gaining a smug look. "In fact, just today I led a successful heist against the buggy pirates." Before, she slammed a rolled-up paper on the table. "Well, it can't be that successful, if you're being chased around." This response caused Nami to fall over her seat into the ground before jumping up and saying, "A little blunt there, don't you think?" The boy merely shrugged as he continued to eat, before looking at the paper in her hand and saying, "What's that?" "Why would want to know?" Nami said, clutching it tightly. Just curious, seeing now that there is no harm in telling him, she unrolled the map and said, "This is a map to the Grand Line." The boy then jumped excitedly and exclaimed, "Really, that's so awesome, are going there?" Nami replied back just as excitedly, "Yep, and I'm going to become rich beyond my wildest dreams." "How are going there though?" "Well, I'll navigate there," she said with a sweat drop. "Are you a navigator?" he asked with hope in his eyes. She smiled, and said, pointing a finger to her chest as she spoke, "Not just a navigator, I'm the navigator." "That's so cool, you should totally join my crew." "Really? Yeah, we would have lots of fun being pirates. We dance and celebrate all day long." Nami then snapped out of her joyous mood and asked in an angry, quiet voice, "You're a pirate?" The boy, noticing the sudden shift, said in a less happy tone, "Yes." "Then forget it, I hate pirates," she said, screamed, and then said, "Of course, you're a pirate. Everyone wants to be a pirate these days. What's so special about being a pirate?" "Well, we party all night long. We dance, we do what we want. What's not to like?" he said in a happy tone. "Yeah, you also kill people and run over whoever you want. Being a pirate is the worst," she said while snarling at him. The boy blinked owlishly before returning to his meal and said, "You lose." Nami then went to the window and sighed. Of all the people to be trapped with, it had to be a pirate. She looked outside and growled with frustration. She was trapped here, and she was sure the buggy pirates were still looking for her. She needed to find a way out. She then saw a rope near the table the boy was eating at and smiled. She then looked at Luffy and said, "I'm sorry for my behavior from before. I think I might want to join your crew after all." Luffy smiled. "Really? Yeah, I just need a favor from you," she said as she brandished her rope to him. Moments later, a couple of twists here and a couple of knots there, and Luffy were all bound up. He was currently walking by Nami's side down the street with his hands tied behind his back. He looked at the orange-haired girl and asked her curiously, "Why did you tie me up?" The girl faked a smile and said, "To show you that I'm good with knots." Luffy took a moment to think about it before saying, "Yeah, makes sense." Nami could only sigh inwardly at his stupidity. Currently, at the center of Orange Town, a huge party was going on. For the onlooker in the distance, it could be mistaken for a circus simply visiting it. However, the group occupying the center was none other than the Buggy Pirates. As the pirates were celebrating another successful day of pillaging around the vacant town, a scream came toward them. As the men looked, they saw one of their own saying, "Captain Buggy, Captain Buggy." Said man looked at him from under the shades of his tent and said, "What?" "The thief who stole our map came back and said she wants to talk to you." This made the man's eyes blow wide open. He then had an animalistic snarl on his face, and a vein popping on his head, but nonetheless, he nodded telling him to let her in. As Nami began to walk through the crowd of pirates, she had to admit she was disgusted to no extent, but she pushed it down, too much hung on the balance. As she finally reached the captain's tent, she kicked the boy to the ground, who yelled out in apparent pain, and said, "Buggy, I'm here to talk to you." The captain of this crew now came out revealing himself. He wore a huge captain's coat with a striped shirt and blue pants and gloves. He also had face paint all across his face in such a manner that resembled clowns. But his most striking feature was his red nose. "You have some serious guts, girly." Buggy scoffed as he stood in front of her. "Now, give a good reason why I shouldn't see how much gut you have," he said while waving a knife. "I have a very good reason," she said, putting all effort to maintain a smile so she doesn't die today. "I want to join you." Silence ran for a little bit as the pirates tried to process what they heard. It was hard indeed to see the very same person who stole from them come back and ask to join them. The pirate clown looked at her and said, "Why? Because I can tell you're going places." She spoke confidently, putting her acting skills to the test. And she pointed at Luffy and kicked him. "And this right here, I'm done with him. He's useless, and always complicates things. He's a burden on my back. So as a peace offering I will hand him over to you." The girl began to rise about this as a bad idea. "Think about it, Captain." Nami then began speaking again. "I was able to steal from you. With my skills, you'll be swimming in gold even before you enter the Grand Line. I'm only joining the winning side." A wave of silence went through the center of the town. The pirates were waiting for their captain's orders while Nami was slightly sweating, afraid that he saw to her trick. They all remained like this until the pirate clown began laughing like a crazy maniac, making Nami go on high alert. He then calmed down and said, "Well, girlie, if that's the case, you got yourself a deal. You got a smart head on your shoulders, knowing when you get rid of dead weight and seeing the real deal." The girl blushed a little to trick the clown and said, "Thank you." Then Buggy came to her and wrapped his arm around her waist and said, "This is the beginning of something very beautiful." "Nami," the girl said while revealing a little chest to trick the pirates even more. "Nami, my girl, this whole thing can't go down without a celebration." He then looked toward his men and said, "Boys, ready the meat and the booze. We're partying till the next century tomorrow." The girl laughed inwardly at his stupidity, but then a noise caught everyone's attention. It was Luffy, who was still on the ground listening to them, blissfully unaware of what was happening, as he asked, "Can I get food?" "You could have just said no," the boy complained as he was now in a cage. He looked in Nami's direction, who was sitting beside Buggy, and said, "And you're not joining my crew anymore." Said girl merely stuck her tongue out. Putting a pout, he looked around and saw a table full of food, so he began to stretch his fingers toward it. He was almost there when someone stepped on his fingers, making them go back to the source. This made him even more annoyed. As Nami looked at the pirate boy sulking, she rolled her eyes. Once she got all the pirates nice and drunk, she was going to take all their money and head to the nearest boat. Perhaps she could free the boy and scold him about being a pirate, but he seems hell-bent on making one from what she saw, so there's no point. Suddenly she felt an arm wrapped around her shoulder, and she began to laugh nervously. "Nami, my dear, how's the new crew till now?" Buggy asked her. She smiled toward him and said, "Amazing." He laughed a little and then said, "That's wonderful. Today is a wonderful day. First I got my map back and then a new beautiful member of my crew. But something still feels like it's missing." He hummed for a bit before a creepy grin spread across his face. "I know, it's time for the Buggy Ball." "Buggy Ball," Nami repeated after him, feeling a little conflicted regarding this choice of words. Suddenly 2 men came and placed a cannon in the middle of the party. They then went back and brought what looked to be a huge cannonball with their pirate's Jolly Roger on it. It consisted of a skull behind it, two crossed bones, and on the center of the skull was a red clown's nose. The two men dropped the ball inside the cannon and one of them lit the fuse, and then ran away. During that time, drums were being played. When the beat finished with the fuse, for a moment nothing happened, but then a giant explosion erupted from the cannon's mouth, going into a section of the town, completely wiping it as if it was a war zone. Near the shore, the two pirates and their prisoners finally made it to the island. The moment they set foot on it, a huge explosion rang through their ears. Robin looked around confused and said, "What was that?" The clown-looking pirate began to sweat profusely, one of Captain Buggy's balls. Zoro on the other end just snorted on the ball's part. Back at the town center, Nami and Luffy alike looked in shock at the aftermath of the explosion. It looked like the area was wiped clean from the face of existence. There were not even any signs of debris, only a clear path of destruction. "So what do you think of that, Nami?" Buggy asked the girl. She chuckled nervously, wondering if she bit more than she'd chew, and said, "That's definitely something." "Ha ha ha," the clown pirate laughed, and then said, "With this map," he said while holding the map Nami stole earlier, "and you, and my buggy balls, we'll take the Grand Line by storm. And then the One Piece will be mine and I'll become the king of pirates." The clown continued laughing till a voice stopped him saying, "You can't become the pirate king." Everyone then looked to the kid still stuck in the cage and asked themselves if he had a death wish or something. Buggy didn't take too kindly to this and a vein popped on his head, and said, "Why not?" The boy's answer made Nami almost faint, "Because I'm going to become king of pirates." Then everyone began to laugh at him, as Buggy said, "Yeah, how are you going to do that if you're stuck in a cage?" He then continued laughing with his men. "If you let me out, I'll punch that big nose of yours and show you how." Suddenly an eerie silence filled the area as all the pirates froze in fear, making Nami begin to worry. Buggy, who was steaming from his ears, turned to Luffy and said, "What did you say?" The boy looked at him and said, "I said if you let me out, I'm going to punch that red big honker of yours so hard it will blow like a horn." With that, Buggy's final straw of sanity broke, and began to scream and jump. Moments later he calmed down and looked at Nami and said, "I guess you were right that he's a burden." The girl, although panicking, played it cool. "I know, right?" she said as she kicked the boy through the bars of his cage. Buggy then looked at Nami with a sadistic look and told her, "I have a solution for that." She gulped as he handed her a box of matches, and told her, "Nami, kill your ex-partner." She looked at her and said, "Is that really necessary? I mean, him stuck in a cage is good enough." She said while grinning nervously, "Let's get back to drinking and having fun." Buggy stopped her and said darkly, "But this is my idea of fun." He then pushed toward the cannon as it was being loaded. The cheering then began as everyone was screaming, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" She looked at the fuse and box of matches in her hand, and she began to quiver. Hazy images began to fill her mind. Distorted feelings filled her as she tried to think of a way out of this. But she couldn't find a way to save herself without killing the boy. But she wasn't a killer, she was a thief. She didn't want to stoop that low. She didn't want to stoop to a pirate's level, his level. "Your hands are shaking." She looked at the boy, who had a very blank expression on his face, as if his life wasn't on the line here. "You don't want to do it, do you?" she growled back at him. "What do you think, that all of us can be heartless killers and harm anyone in our way? Being a pirate isn't about harming others, it's about risking your own life." He said that with a huge smile. She looked at him with confusion in her eyes and asked herself, who is this kid? She then suddenly felt someone push, saying, "If you aren't going to do it, then move aside and let someone else do it." She looked at him as he took the box from her and lighted a match. If you ask what happened at that moment, she can tell that she didn't know. The girl quickly ran and revealed a staff from under her skirt and whacked the pirate over the head with it. She stood there with shock on her face, until she heard something. "Nami, what is this?" Buggy called her out. She composed herself and tried to play innocent. "I slipped." "You slipped?" Buggy said, unconvinced. Nami then decided that he might as well drop the charade, and said, "Sorry Buggy, but I wasn't planning on joining your crew in the first place." Buggy looked extremely angry, so much so that it rolled off in waves, but then Luffy interjected, "So that means you want to be in my crew?" Nami looked at him like he was crazy, and said, grinding her teeth, "The hell not." Luffy looked at her confused, then you're with Ein to pop on her forehead, and said with a growl, "No." "Then you want to be with me," the boy said like before. "No, I don't want to be a pirate," Nami screamed. "But you were with him." "No, I wasn't." "Then whose crew do you want to be in?" Feeling something snap in her, she released her frustrations. "I don't want to be a pirate. I hate them all. I wish they'd all disappear. The world would be better off without them. I'd rather die before I become one." "Wow," Luffy said, speechless. He then blinked and said, "That's a lot of hate." "So you'd rather die, huh?" A voice from behind her spoke. "Well, it will be my greatest desire to help you out." She looked at Buggy, who had crazed look on his face. Suddenly she heard a wheezing sound, as both she and Luffy looked to the cannon, and saw that the fuse was ignited. Luffy began to panic, demanding water. She ran quickly to the cannon and used her hands to snuff out the fuse. She winced a little as her hands were burned. When she removed them, she noticed the blisters that formed, causing her to frown. She then saw Buggy's men advancing toward her. She took a fighting position as they all attacked. She tried to hit their feet, but being clowns with aerobatic skills, they jumped in the air, avoiding her. She closed her eyes as the blades drew closer to her. One feeling now filled her, which was disappointment. As she waited for the pain to arrive, it never happened. Daring to open an eye, she noticed all the pirates were being held by a man with green hair. He looked toward her and asked her, "Are you okay?" She quickly nodded. He then looked at Luffy and asked him with a smirk, "Is this going to be a common theme with you, Captain?" Luffy merely laughed at Zoro and said, "Thanks, Zoro." Nami blinked and looked at the man and said, "Are you Zoro as Pirate Hunter Zoro?" Never asked for the name, he replied casually. "Here to hunt, Zoro?" Buggy asked. "No, just here for my captain," he said, pointing to Luffy. "Well, I want to hunt you." "Fine by me," Zoro said, readying his swords. "Luffy." A panicked voice attracted everyone's attention. Nami looked and noticed a young girl about her age running to the boy in the cage. Robin looked at her boyfriend and asked him, "Luffy, are you alright? Who did this to you?" Luffy smiled at her and said, "I'm fine, don't worry, Robin." He then added, "They put in the cage," nodding to the pirates, before nodding to Nami and saying, "She's the one who tied me up." Robin looked at Nami with a nasty glare toward her and said, "That's so." Nami didn't know why, but she began to sweat nervously when this girl arrived. Zoro, sensing Robin's foul mood, stepped back a little as the young woman stepped forward. Robin looked at the pirates and said, "You're going to immediately set my Luffy quick or else." Nami shivered with every word the girl said till she made a double on her words, and one question popped in her mind. Did she say her Luffy? The silent pirates then erupted in laughter, and Buggy said, "If we don't set him free, we're going to do girly." Robin's eye twitched and Luffy looked away and said, "You shouldn't have said that." Robin merely crossed her arms and muttered a few words. The next thing the Buggy pirates knew was pain. Treasure of a dog. "What in the world is that?" Nami asked in complete shock at what she just witnessed. She, along with the swordsman, the dark-haired girl, and the pirate boy were running across the streets of the small town. The pirate boy was still in his cage with his hands tied, his crewmate lifting the cage he is in by one of its bars. They kept running on the streets of the town till they reached a point which they deemed it as far enough from the Buggy pirates. "I think that's far enough," he said as he sat down in the cage, trying to catch his breath. Nami then noticed that this might be her only chance to run away unscathed, so she started slowly slipping away, or at least tried. She didn't manage to get 2 steps away before she felt something grip her feet. Daring herself, looking down, she noticed it was 2 hands. Before she can even think about freeing herself, more arms started to appear around her body, and they gripped her. Then she heard a very smooth voice that held a lot of anger behind it. "Not so fast." She could hear the sound of footsteps approaching her. She gulped nervously as the footsteps finally came to a halt, and the dark-haired girl stood in front with a very annoyed look on her face. The girl then looked at her and asked, "Is there a reason why my Luffy was about to become mincemeat?" "Your Luffy," Nami said with a dumbfounded expression on her face. She then managed to look back at the pirate boy who had his first mate untie his arms. Nami then looked back at the girl and said, "You mean you and him?" Robin's expression then soured even more, and she said in an agitated voice, "I don't remember asking for relationship advice," she said as she tightened her grip on the girl, and then asked again, "Now, I'm gonna ask again, why was my Luffy about to be sacrificed?" Nami shivered at the way the girl was talking to her, and she slowly answered, struggling to breathe, "Because I was trying to trick Buggy to get his treasure." This answer only helped further enrage the girl as she increased the pressure applied on the orange-haired girl, and said, "So my boyfriend was about to die because he wanted to get some few money notes." Nami, although afraid, managed to nod her head and say, "Yes." Robin looked at her and said in a low voice that meant business, "I'm not amused." She then proceeded to increase her grip. Nami was squirming in her place. The only thought in her head was that it couldn't end this way, not after everything she went through. Not that she is so close now, but a little bit more and she would break. "Robin, stop," Luffy shouted from the cage. "She's my friend, don't hurt her." Robin looked at her boyfriend with a shocked expression, and so did Nami. Even after everything she did, he considered a friend. He must be either really stupid or really believe that they're friends. If Robin wanted to say something, Zoro beat it to it. "Wait a minute, so you're saying the girl that tied you up, handed you over to the crazy clown Psycho, and almost got blasted to Kingdom Come as your friend?" Luffy looked at him with a smile and said, "Of course, and she wasn't going to kill me, I know it." Seeing the seriousness in his eyes, Robin sighed and released her hold on the girl forward and began rubbing her throat and sucked air greedily. She looked at Robin with a hurt look and said, "Thanks." "Don't mention it," the girl replied to her. Robin then made her way toward Luffy and tried to help Zoro to open the cage. Suddenly a voice caught everyone's "Stop, right where you are." Everyone looked and saw an old man wearing all over his body pots holding a pitchfork appeared. The old man then pointed his pitchfork toward them and asked, "Are you people with Buggy?" Zoro slowly tried to stand up as he said, "Clam down." "I said don't move." "Now, are you people with buggy?" the old man shouted. Zoro slapped his forehead as he pointed to Luffy and said, "If we were with buggy, would he be like that?" The man then looked at Luffy, who waved his hand at him with a smile. The old man then visibly relaxed as he began apologizing to them. "I'm sorry, I thought, please forgive me." Robin smiled and said, "No problem." She then looked at him and said, "Where are my manners? I'm Robin. And this is Zoro," she said, pointing to the swordsman who nodded his head. "And that's Luffy," pointing to the boy in the cage who waved his hands. "And the girl who's trying to run away is Nami, I presume." Said girl stopped in her tracks and said hi in an awkward manner. The man then straightened his body and put his pitchfork to the side like a soldier and said, "My name is Boodle, and I'm the mayor of Orangetown." Boodle then looked at the boy in the cage and said, "Please allow me to help you," he said as he ran over to the cage and put the pitchfork in the cage, and tried to tear the top open only to fall on the ground. Zoro saw him and came to his aid as both of them this time began to apply pressure to the cage in an attempt to open it. However, the cage proved to be stronger than the pitchfork as it broke, causing both of them to fall and stumble on the ground. Luffy couldn't help but start laughing at what happened. Although the situation was kinda frustrating, Robin also began to chuckle. Nami stared at both men as they tried to find a way to pry the cage open, as she contemplated something in her mind. Suddenly she went into her pockets and held something to Robin, who eyed her suspiciously, so she said, "These are the keys to the cage." Robin then said, "And why did you decide to pull them out now?" "I was going to let him out anyway, but it wasn't a good time," she said as Robin took the keys and went to help her boyfriend. She looked at the dark-haired girl disapproving look as she walked away from her, but honestly, it wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last. She just didn't care anymore. "Aw, my leg, it hurts," one of Buggy's men yelled in agony. "Walk it off, you moron," Buggy screamed. He then looked around to his crew and saw them all withering in pain from what just happened. He then examined him. No damage was good. He then jumped on the side of the tavern looking for any sign of those, and he annoyed, and said, "Great day, first my map gets stolen. Then that brat Nami fools me and stab in the back. And now this happens, I can't even describe it." The clown then squinted his eyes hoping for a sign of them, and if it wasn't for my. He heard a loud thumping sound coming from behind him. He then looked around and said with a smile, "Ah, Moji? I'm happy to see that you weren't injured." Said man appeared to wear nothing but pants, and on his head appeared to be some kind of fur hat. "Same could be said to you too, Captain Buggy." He spoke from atop a large loin with what appeared to have a purple mane. Buggy's frustrated face turned to that of happiness as he said with an evil grin, "Good, now I have a mission for you." "You want me to find those brats and bring them over to you?" Moji said. "No, only Nami, bring her back to punish her for her betrayal, but the others are free game." "Understood." The man spoke before looking back at his loin and said, "Well Richie, it would appear you're going to have lunch early today." The lion merely replied by licking his chops as he readied himself to hunt his prey. "Almost there," Boodle said as he fiddled with the lock using the key, and finally, a click was heard. The cage opened and Luffy went free. He sprang to his feet, happy to have his freedom back. He said, "Finally I'm out." He then looked over to the four beside him and said, "Thanks guys." Zoro said, "No problem." And the mayor merely smiled at them and waved his hand as if to say it's nothing. Robin on the other hand rushed Luffy and tackled him in a hug, as she said, "You're alright. You made me so worried." Nami meanwhile stood alone on the side, awkwardly kicking the ground. There was no reason for her standing, but why she did that was beyond her. She then heard Luffy calling her as he said, "Nami, thanks for THSHE." Weakly replied, "It's not a big deal." Robin on the other hand began poking Luffy's chest as she said, "If it wasn't for her, you wouldn't be there in the first place." Nami then shivered at Robin's look and statement. She hated being put in the corner like that. "Come on, Robin. She's not a bad person," Luffy first said. He then added, "In fact, she's also a navigator." He then let go of his girlfriend and walked to Nami slinging a shoulder over her and said, "She going to the Grand Line, and you yourself said it, we need a navigator." Robin frowned at his logic, but there's no way she was going to accept. "Stop right there," Zoro said, echoing Robin's thoughts bluntly. "So the person who almost got you killed is going to be your navigator?" "Yeah, we need a navigator, and she happens to have a map," he said excitedly. Nami, who was listening to this weird conversation, said, "Hold on a minute, who said I want to be a pirate?" Luffy looked at her with a confused look, and said, "But weren't on Buggy's crew?" She took a deep breath and said, "No, I wasn't. I was trying to trick them to get his money." She hoped this would be enough for the dumb pirate to understand. "So you want to be on my crew then?" he said happily. She facepalmed at his stupidity and said as calmly as possible, "No, I don't want to be in your crew." "But then that means you want to be on that clown's crew?" A vein appeared on her forehead as she took deep breaths. "No, I don't." Luffy then put his hand on his chin and appeared to be in deep thought. She then said, "Now, I finally get it." Nami smiled that he finally understood her. That all crumbled when he said, "So you do want to be on my crew?" Losing whatever patience she had left, she shouted for the heavens to hear her out. No, I don't want to be on any pirate's crew. This anger wasn't doing her any good, and worst of that, when she looked at the pirate boy, he was looking somewhere else. She screamed at the top of her lungs. Are you even listening to anything I said? Who's that dog? The pirate boy asked. And true, a small white-haired dog was sitting in front of a store. The mayor then looked at it and said, oh, that's Shoo Shoo. Shoo Shoo? Nami echoed. Yeah, that's him. He always so quiet that no one notices him at first. He then saw Luffy approach to pet him and said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. He doesn't exactly like people touching him. The boy then backed away, immediately having dealt with animal bits before. Actually, I came here to feed him before I ran into you folks. The mayor said as he approached the dog, pulling a dog tray from under his clothes with a box of dog food. Robin then asked him, aren't there an owner for him? The mayor sighed as he finished filling the bowl with food and said, he used to have an owner, but he died a while ago. Nami's face then soured as she said, did the buggy pirates do it? What? Oh no, he died before they came. The man then began telling the dog's story. You see, his owner was a very good friend of mine who owned this pet shop. He said, pointing to the shop beside them. He was a good man who liked to help people, but the human body can take so much so it fails. So when he died, Shoo Shoo became a permanent guard for this store, waiting for the owner to return to it, always standing in front of it. As he finished the story, the pirates all gave sympathetic looks towards the dog. Nami then asked, why don't you try to tell him that the owner isn't coming back? I did many times, the man admitted, however I think Shoo Shoo already knows that, but he's doing it regardless. Zoro then yawned and looked at the old man and said, do you know a place where I can go and rest for a while? Nami then whacked him on the head and said, way to change the mood, can you try to be a bit more insensitive? Zoro began to growl at her. The mayor quickly diffused the situation by saying, yeah, please go to my home, it's around the corner. Zoro then thanked the man, walked to his house hoping to rest a while before they leave this island. As soon as Zoro disappeared, a large stomping sound made its way toward their ears. Boodle then paled considerably as he yelped in fear, oh no, it's the beast tamer. He then ran and hid around the corner with Nami following his lead. He then looked and noticed that the couple still standing in his place and said, what are you doing? Moji is coming with his loin here. He's going to kill you. Luffy then looked at him with excitement, a lion, that's so awesome, I want to see it. Robin smiled at her boyfriend's enthusiasm and said, I'm also interested in seeing this beast. The mayor tried to run and save them, but Nami held him back and said, don't worry, these two are the real monsters here. She then looked as a figure began to appear in the distance. It made its way closer till it stopped. Finally, the man on the loin spoke, so you are the people who angered Captain Buggy. He finished as he rubbed his pet's head. I must say this was disappointing. Richie usually likes to hunt his prey before eating it. Luffy merely tilted his head to the side in confusion, and asked, who are you again? This caused Robin beside him to giggle, while the mayor and Nami watched what happened with shocked faces. Moji looked slightly offended that he wasn't recognized, but then shook his head and said, very well, I assume it's only fair to know the name of your executioner. I'm Moji the Beastbreaker. No animal in this world can't resist my control. He introduced himself, and then added, you people have crossed Captain Buggy, so I have been sent to deal with you and that traitor Nami. He finished as he looked in the direction of the girl who shivered in fear. Luffy seemed to get excited by this and started to jump up and down, but he noticed something and raised his hand. Moji saw this and said, you have something to say before I end you. He hummed for a moment and said, very well, what is your last wish in this world? What's with the funny costume? Luffy asked. This earned a shocked reaction from Moji, who seemed offended. At the same time, Robin broke down laughing, while Nami smacked her forehead and the mayor could only stare in disbelief. Moji looked at him with anger, I'll have you know that this is my hair you were talking about. Robin stopped laughing as she processed what he said, hair? You mean even on your... She quickly had to fight the feeling of nausea and bile that formed in her mouth. Seeing the ridicule that he was experiencing, Moji finally blew his lid off as he shouted, enough. He then added, I'll show you the power of Moji the Beastbreaker. He was about to order his lion to attack when he noticed something, a small dog. He smirked and said, perhaps a demonstration of my powers will make you understand what you're dealing with. He then hopped off his lion and walked towards Shoo Shoo. The mayor began to squirm nervously as he saw this and wanted to go to stop the man had Nami not stopped him. Calm down and don't throw your life away, Nami yelled at the mayor, who was trying to free himself from her grasp. Moji then walked toward the dew as the mayor shouted at him, no, get away from him. Calm down, old timer, Moji said as he calmly walked to the dog and said, I'm only going to assert my dominance on him to prove that no animal can defy Moji the Beastbreaker. Said man squatted down neath the dog and reached out his hand as Luffy said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. The mayor says he's bitter. Moji scoffed at him and said, nonsense, no beast in the sea or land can resist my power. He then looked at the dog and put his palm toward him and said, shake. For a moment it seemed that the dog obeyed him as it moved forward. This caused a smug grin to appear on the man's face. Said smug vanished mere moments later as the dog sank its teeth into his hand, causing him to flail his hand in pain. "Stop, stop!" The so-called beast tamer yelled in pain as he shook his hand to get the dog off it. Meanwhile they're laughing without shame at the man's misfortunate, while Nami raised an eyebrow at the pitiful display in front of her. The mayor could only look at the sight with wide eyes as his jaw hit the ground from shock. Get off, the man continued yelling as the dog hung on his hand. Finally, with one mighty heave, he was able to throw the dog of his hand into a wall near the shop as he shouted, "I said get off." He then began nursing his hand, which throbbed in pain from the dog's bite. Luffy and Robin immediately stopped laughing and said, "Hey, what was that for?" He looked at the dog and said, "No one makes a fool of me and lives to tell the tale." The beast tamer then rode his loin and said, "Richie." The lion perked up. Moji pointed his finger at the dog and said, "Have some appetizers." Said lion growled in anticipation. He then ran toward the downed dog and opened its jaw, only from the jaw to shut by 6 disembodied hands that formed on his mouth. "Sue is fleur, muzzle," Robin called out. Moji looked in disbelief at the sight before him. He then saw Robin and Luffy standing in front of the dog, and Luffy said, "We won't allow you to harm him." "Indeed, we will stop you," Robin stated. Off from the sides, Nami stared with wide eyes at the scene. She couldn't believe that these pirates were risking their lives for someone, and a dog of all people. No, this wasn't right. This is a play. They'll just play heroes for now before they run away with their tails between their legs. That's what pirates are, right? Moji finally reached his limit as he yelled, "Enough. You people have been annoying the moment I came here, and I'm going to end you right here, right now." He then tapped his lion's back, who was struggling to overpower the arms keeping his mouth shut, and said, "Richie, rip the girl apart with your claws." The lion then let out a muffled growl as he jumped at the girl, only for her boyfriend to grab her and jump to the side, avoiding the lion. However, this caused her to lose her concentration and released her hold on the beast in front of her. Moji then smiled and said, "Now since my Richie is free, I'll be able to get rid of you too," he said with a smug grin, but then looked at the dog and the shop he was standing in front of now. But first thing, Richie kill this dog and destroy the shop. This caused the mayor to free himself from Nami's grip and scream, "No, don't. Leave him alone." Moji scoffed and ordered Richie to attack the mayor. The lion tried to jump only from him to fall to the ground. Moji was surprised and looked to the back only to notice 2 hands disappearing. Robin then stepped forward and said, "I believe that we were in the middle of a fight here, so please next time, pay more attention." She then looked at her boyfriend and said, "Luffy, you don't mind me taking care of this nuisance?" "No problem," he said with a smile. Moji clicked his tongue and ordered Richie to attack Robin. The lion obeyed and quickly jumped her, only for her to be yanked to the side by Luffy. Moji merely laughed at Luffy and began to taunt, "So you are all talk, huh? Can't do much with your girlfriend around, can you? Can't blame you though." He stopped for a moment before a very mocking look appeared on his face, and said, "Then again, I can't think of any man who would let his woman fight for him." On the side, Nami couldn't help but agree with the beast tamer. What kind of man would let his so-called girlfriend fight his battles? And what shocked her most was that the girl was actually happy to do that. She then concluded that this girl was the only capable fighter of this group. She then looked in the direction the swordsman went to and snorted. He must have heard the lion tamer coming and fled, so he doesn't have to fight. She looked at the pirate boy and shook her head. He's only the boss of this group and can't do anything without his girlfriend. She fights the battles and he gets the glory. Then a very devious thought crossed her mind, with so many pirates around, maybe they will all kill each other. That way she can take both their money and flee away safely. Back to the battle, Robin's eyebrows twitched due to the tamer's comment, so she said, "Luffy, I'll have to give this animal and his pet a lesson in manners. Please stay aside," earning again a thumbs up. Robin began to size her opponents. The lion was the main obstacle, and the tamer was only a mere annoyance. She looked at them and ushered for them to move. Moji then laughed and said, "Well, normally I don't Richie treats before dinner, but I'll let slide this once. Go get her, Richie." The lion then roared as he jumped toward Robin, but suddenly as he became airborne something began to happen. From beneath him on the ground, arms began to sprout, each one of them upon the other, climbing towards the lion until they finally formed a ring around his neck. Robin then yelled, "Trinta fleur leash." The lion was yanked from the air, causing the tamer to fall from his back on the ground. He looked in horror as his lion was then smashed into the ground headfirst with a powerful smack, causing the creature to black out. He then ran toward his pet and began to shake him. "Richie, come on, wake up." He heard footsteps and looked up to see the girl approaching him, causing him to back away in fear from her, and asked her, "What are you?" The girl stopped, a smile appearing on her face as she said, "Well, I'm just the humble user of the Hana Hana fruit," she said as she rotated her arms, causing several others to appear on her like a wreath. Moji gasped as he said, "Impossible, only Captain ate one." He then stood up and tried to make a run for it, leaving a confused Robin behind. Moji didn't succeed though, as an arm grabbed and yanked him back to the pirate boy. Moji looked in fear at the boy and said, "Another one like a captain." Luffy was slightly confused and he began to ask, "Do you mean?" Moji interrupted him and said, "Let me go. If Captain Buggy hear about this, he'll have your heads for it. Let me go before he comes for you." Luffy smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm going to him." He then punched Moji and knocked him out. Luffy then looked at Robin and hugged her while smiling. He began to twirl her around as he said, "Great job, Robin." The girl giggled and said, "It was nothing. The beasts back home were 10 times bigger than this one," she said, remembering all the adventures she had with the boys in the forest. "I know, I could have taken him down too, but you insisted," the boy said as he gave his girlfriend a peck on the cheek. Nami couldn't believe her eyes. She just took Son that lion, like it was nothing. She couldn't believe her eyes. And then the girl said she fought bigger monsters than this, only for the boy to confuse her even more, saying he would have taken it down if he wanted to. She found that hard to believe but chose to give him the benefit of a doubt. A voice then startled her. "What happened here?" She looked at the swordsman who appeared behind her. "Where did you come from?" "I tried to find his house," he said, pointing to the mayor, "but the instructions were confusing. It was like the houses moving on their own. Then I ran into a couple of problems, but I fixed it. Then I found you people." Nami had to fight the urge to tell the swordsman he had the worst sense of direction she ever heard of, but she shrugged as he ran to his crewmates. "Hey, Zoro, look. Robin defeated one of Bogey's men," Luffy exclaimed happily. "I see," the swordsman hummed. "Then the guy the first defeated was also one of his men," he said as he scratched the back of his head. "What do you mean?" Robin asked. The swordsman then began to explain what happened with him as the mayor and Nami approached them. "Well, after I left you guys a couple of minutes earlier, man, what is up with this town?" Zoro said as he tried to find the mayor's house. "It's like the buildings are moving on their own." He stopped looking around for the house to get a quick nap. Suddenly his senses flared, and he blocked a sword swipe. I Rorona Zoro. A man with olive hair wearing a circus performer outfit with a blue and white checkered scarf around his neck. "Am I supposed to know you?" Zoro asked the man with a serious look on his face that promised immense pain. "I suppose not," the guy said, "but allow me to introduce myself," the man said as he bowed on the unicycle hat. "I'm Kabji, the master of tricks." "Okay," Zoro said, clearly not impressed. "And I was sent to fish out those who annoyed Buggy, and look and behold, I stumbled upon the famous pirate hunter," the man said sarcastically. "Yeah, so I had to fight you, right?" Zoro said as he tightened his bandana around his head, and began to remove his swords. Kabji didn't answer, only flung himself forward saying, "Sting of the Scorpion." This attack was immediately blocked by Zoro, who pushed him back. The unicyclist then said, "Old man's fire," as he blew fire in the three-styled swordsman's face. The swordsman lifted his arms to protect himself, and on instinct, he blocked a swipe that was coming to him. "It appears I underestimated you, Zoro," Kabji said, but then smiled. "But I must see, you claim to fight with 3 swords, it's quite intriguing. I guess you were a walking circus on your own." Zoro glared at him with a demonic look. "Shut up and fight. From what I've seen, you're only flipping your lips and doing some cheap tricks. Fight for real." This agitated Kabji, who then said, "Then I'll end it now." The man then began to put speed in his unicycle, building up momentum. Zoro then raised his 3 swords and readied himself to finish this battle. Kabji then blasted himself forward towards Zoro, as the green-haired man said, "Onigiri." Kabji now only needed to thrust his blade forward as he was close to Zoro's chest, but it never happened. Suddenly he felt immense pain in his chest as he fell from his unicycle. He then cursed his luck, saying, "Damn, I can't believe I was beaten by thieves." Zoro then said, "We're pirates, not thieves. Get it through your thick skull." Kabji then passed out as Zoro said, "Where are they now?" He then began to look for them. "And then I found you guys," Zoro said as he finished his story. Luffy looked at him with stars in his eyes and exclaimed, "That's so awesome, Zoro." Robin smiled and said, "Indeed, great work." Zoro only rubbed his head and questioned, "So what now?" Mayor then came up to them and said, "Thank you for your services, but now I need to go and fight Buggy." Zoro then grabbed him and said, "Calm down, old-timer, don't rush your death." Robin was about to say something when she felt something brush against her leg. She looked down only to see Shu rubbing his head against her leg. She then crouched down and began to rub its head while smiling. The mayor smiled at the girl and said, "It would appear that Shu likes you." Luffy then began to pout and complain, saying, "Why does Robin get to pet the dog, and I don't?" Zoro then patted his shoulder and said, "Go for it. I bet he'll like you very much." Luffy looked at him with hope in his eyes and said, "You really think so?" "Of course," the swordsman replied, "you'd make one hell of a chew toy for him to bite on." He finished as he began to laugh at his captain's expense while the latter only pouted at him. Suddenly both men tensed up and Luffy yelled. Zoro grabbed them quickly. Luffy then grabbed Robin and the dog, running away for cover. while Zoro did the same for the mayor and Nami. The three people looked shocked as they were thrown onto the ground harshly, but after a few moments understood why. A large explosion ran through the area where they were at, incinerating everything in its path. They all looked at the ballfire as it ate everything in its path. They then all stood up looking at the carnage, but the dog barking caught their attention. The poor thing was now barking at the remains of what used to be his home. This caused everyone present to feel pity for the poor thing. Robin softly said, "All this effort to protect the store only for it to come out in vain." She clasped her hands as if praying and accepting what happened. Zoro looked at the scene with anger. Sure, he wasn't the most emotional person, but he knew a treasure when he saw one. This store was this dog's treasure, and it seemed to value it. He looked at one of his swords and sighed. It was hard to see someone lose something important to them. Nami only stood there with one thought in her head. This is what happens when pirates appear. They destroy everything and wreck people's lives regardless of what happens. But she looked at the odd trio of pirates she just met today, but they didn't look like bad people. She shook her head and said, "Pirates are nothing less, nothing more, right?" She then looked over to Luffy, the said captain of this ragtag group, and she was shocked. He looked angry beyond belief. He stared at the fire as if he was trying to snuff it out with his thoughts. His eyes were dialed so much that the pupils of his eyes were gone or dialed to microscopic levels. If looks can kill, then this was it. She then saw him toward the flames. She didn't know what came over her, but she yelled, "Luffy!" As Luffy entered the flames, Robin ran to help him, but Zoro stopped her and said, "Don't worry, he'll be back." And truly after a couple of moments, Luffy appeared from the burning carnage and began to cough from all the smoke he inhaled inside. Robin then ran to his side and reprimanded him, "Monkey D. Luffy, what in the world possessed you to do something like that?" He looked at her and said, "Sorry, but I had to do it." She looked at him and nodded. He then approached the dog and pulled something from under his vest. It was a burnt box of dog food. Luffy sighed and said, "This was your treasure, wasn't it?"
The dog then began to whimper in sadness as Luffy ruffled its hair. The dog then hollowed to the sky in pain over its loss, earning looks of sympathy from all those around him. Luffy then put the box of kibble in front of the dog and said, "Don't worry. It'll be over soon."
Luffy then stood up and began marching away without saying a word. The mayor looked in confusion and said, "Where is he going?" Zoro looked at him and said, "You heard him, he's going to end this." Over in the center of the town, an agitated Buggy was ordering his men to fill the cannon with another buggy ball. One of his men came over and said, "Captain, but what about Moji and Kabji? We haven't heard from them yet." The clown snarled at his subordinate and said, "If they were good enough they would have been back by now." He then screamed, "Fill the cannon." Said pirate then scrambled away, and returned with a buggy ball to put in the cannon. The man then lit a match and put it near the fuse, and in a second another monstrous blast hit the small town. "Another one," Buggy shouted. He was going to find that traitor Nami sooner or later, kill her, take his map and send this town to Kingdom Come, and finally leave this miserable place. His thoughts were cut as a voice yelled, "Hey Big Nose, I'm here to kick your butt." A vein popped as he looked at the source. It was none other than the Straw Hat Boy from before. He smiled menacingly as he said, "Here to die, boy." Luffy then said, "No, I'm here to punish your big fat hunker so bad it will fly off." Buggy then began to yell curse like a sailor, sending words back and forth, making his men wonder if he ever kissed his mom with that mouth. He then looked at Luffy and roared, "You bastard, I'm going to kill you." "No, I'm going to kick your butt for taking away that dog's treasure," Luffy retorted. Silence then filled the area as the pirates processed what the boy just said. That was followed by laughter from everyone, as Buggy cried out, "A dog's treasure? That a good one. Tell me, what else do you have? A cat's one too?" Buggy then looked at him and said, "The only treasure that exists is gold, silver, and gems. Everything else is worthless in value. So why don't I send you to hell with that dog's treasure? Ready the buggy ball?" His men scrammed in the cannon and lit the fuse as Buggy said, "Nice trip." As the cannon exploded, Luffy yelled, "Gum Gum Balloon." He then sucked a huge amount of air, causing his stomach to expand in huge proportions. The cannonball then hit his stomach and lost momentum. He then looked at Buggy, who panicked. Luffy then flung the cannonball back at the pirates, who screamed in fear. In mere seconds, most of the Buggy pirates were no more, going out of town. Smoke covered the area where the Buggy pirates used to hang in. Their tents has been decimated by the explosion of their buggy ball. Most of their men had been wiped out and most likely only a few remained standing. Luffy then released the air that he sucked in and said, "This is for the shop, you bastard." As the smoke cleared, Luffy then noticed two charred bodies floating in the air. Suddenly, they began to descend until they reached the ground. Luffy watched with wide eyes as Buggy threw his men aside like puppets and said, "Thanks for the save." Luffy felt his veins popping as he watched this scene. To him, a crew is a family, they must be protected, not used in any form or matter. So he yelled at Buggy, "Hey you red-nosed jerk, why the hell did you do that to your friends?" Buggy looked at him with a glare that could kill, and said, "Those fools don't matter. The only thing that matters in gold and my treasures," he exclaimed, before doing a double on what Luffy said in the beginning and turned around and screamed, "And what the hell did you call me?" "I called a big red-nosed freak," Luffy yelled for the world to hear him. Buggy then reached his limit as he screamed, "No," makes fun of Captain Buggy and leaves to tell the tale. He then looked at his men who were beginning to recover and said, "Men, kill him." The recovering pirates look at their captain in bewilderment and one of them says, "Captain, he's a monster. We can't take him down." Similar thoughts begin to emanate from the clown pirates as Luffy stood to the side quite confused at what was happening, so much so he looked at Buggy and said, "Hey Clown Nose, are your men planning to fight me or what?" Buggy merely blinked at him, choosing to forget the insult and look toward his men who were still refusing to fight. He said in dark voice that was barely a whisper, "Either you fight or I'll throw you to the fish." But Captain, his men stopped what they were saying, noticing the very demonic look in their captain's eyes, and started debating their life choices. It's either they fight a monster with God knows kind of body or they disobey their captain. It was the hardest choice of their lives, which one was the least painful fate. Buggy on the other hand was steaming, not only that Brat made an idiot out of him, but he was now annoyed by his men's refusal to do as he says. He looked at them with fury and said, "You have 10 seconds, either you fight him or you all will die." His men then made their choice and began to charge toward Luffy, who just stood there not caring at all about what was happening around him. One brave soul then charged to throw a punch at Luffy, only for the rubber boy to bend unnaturally and grab his shoulders with his arms. Luffy then returned his body to its normal state, at the same time giving the unlucky pirate the headbutt of the century, knocking him out cold. Meanwhile, a pirate tried to sneak on Luffy from behind, only for the rubber man to sense him as he tried to throw a punch. Luffy simply stepped aside him, before kicking said pirate in the gut, knocking the breath out of him, and throwing him aside. Then a group of pirates decided to attack him as a unit, hoping to succeed where their friends have failed miserably. First one tried to deliver a heavy haymaker, only for Luffy to sidestep him, grabbing him and throwing at his companions who avoided him. Another tried to kick, only for the pirate boy to jump back before yelling, "Gum gum pistol." Said pirate threw up from the force of the punch and passed out immediately. The others who came with them became hesitant to attack themselves. The guy was a monster who they couldn't even dream to beat, but one look at their captain's eyes and they knew it was either this or death, so they chose the former. They then lifted their blades and ran forward screaming and started to swing at the boy. Luffy for his part began to dodge effortlessly the attacks before backing away and yelling at them, "Gum gum whip." The unlucky pirates then noticed the boy's leg beginning to stretch. It then hit them all, flinging them aside and knocking them out of commission. All the while other pirates were staring at him, asking themselves if they ever stood a chance to actually beat him. Luffy then laughed a little and said, "Seriously, you are all no fun." He was suddenly silenced as a bullet hit his head. One of Buggy's men then said, "About this for fun, you freak." He then looked at the captain and said, "Boss, I killed him." Buggy looked pleased for a moment and said, "Good, whoa." He looked at the boy's body and noticed the lack of blood coming from him, and also noticing that part of the boy's head was stretching. Before another second passed, the stretched part returned to its normal form, also flinging the bullet away. Luffy looked at the guy who shoot him and said, "Yeah, that won't really work on me." He then began to stretch his cheeks and began to say, "My entire body is made out of rubber." "What kind of monster are you?" the man yelled. Luffy, instead of answering, sent a rubber punch toward the man's way, knocking him unconscious on the spot. "So who's next?" the boy asked, smiling, making the others shiver in fear as they tried to get him. Buggy watched as his men were being thrown in and out of consciousness by nothing but Brat. He felt so humiliated by this. He was Captain Buggy, the man who was going to become the Pirate King, a living legend, and he was not going to allow this to stand. He looked at the rubber boy and shouted, "You're dead." The boy looked in his direction and said, "Shut up and fight, big nose." A vein popped on Buggy's forehead, but before he can do anything, Luffy called, "Gum gum pistol." The punch nailed him right in the head. It was so strong that it actually tore off his head. Luffy looked in panic and started yelling, "I didn't mean to kill him." But he then noticed something, that the head was now floating, and it returned to its body. Buggy smirked and said, "It's the end of the line for you, Straw Hat. Any last words?" Luffy smiled and said, "Bring it, Red Nose," and with that the real fight began. On the other side of the town, Robin was now anxiously walking back and forth, waiting for Luffy to return. It didn't help a bit that a huge explosion occurred a few minutes ago to ease her worries. She knew her boyfriend's fighting prowess and didn't doubt it, but at the same she couldn't help but worry. She then felt someone grab her shoulder. She looked and saw Zoro. The green-haired man for his part wasn't worried at all. "Calm down, Robin, he'll be fine." "I know, but I just can't help. He's going to be fine. I'm honestly more worried about the poor soul who's going to try and fight him more. I'm worried about him." Robin stared at Zoro blankly for a moment, making the swordsman begin to sweat a little. She thought about what he said, and the more she thought about it, the more it made sense. She then giggled at the swordsman's nervous face and said, "Calm down. I'm not some kind of yandere who's going to kill you for insulting her boyfriend." She giggled a little before taking a more serious look and saying, "Or am I?" before she began to laugh. The swordsman breathed a sigh of relief before feeling a fist connecting with his skull and looked to see a furious Nami looking at him with her fist shaking. "That doesn't mean you can't be a little gentler regarding this kind of subject," Nami told him. Which was Zoro's simple reply to Nami's attack. This caused her to begin yelling at him, to which he ignored. Meanwhile, Robin stared at Nami. This girl made no sense to her. At first, she tricked her boyfriend and led him to his possible doom, then helped him escape, stated that she hates pirates, was worried for Luffy when he walked into the flames, and now was sympathizing with her. She was an interesting character to say the least. Nami then noticed Robin watching her and said in fear, "Why are you looking at me like that?" She didn't want to get on her bad side again. Robin then shook the thoughts in her head away and said, "You hate pirates so much, why are you sympathizing with me?" "Hey, hating pirates is one thing. Wanting to be a decent human being is another," the girl retorted. Robin smiled at her as she wanted to know more about this puzzle named Nami. Meanwhile, Mayor Boodle sat beside Shoo Shoo, petting the poor thing for the loss of its home. He then stood up while shaking his fist and said, "I can't stand for this." Everyone looked at him in curiosity as he said, "Thank you very much for helping me, but I must now go to reclaim my town from those monsters." Zoro then said, "A little late, don't you think? My captain is already dealing with him. Just wait and it'll be over in no time." "No, I can't. As the mayor of this town, it's my job to protect it," he said as he began marching to the center of the town. "Thank you for your help, but please this is..." He didn't get to continue as an arm appeared from his back and chopped him on his neck, knocking him unconscious. Nami looked at Robin and said, "What was that for?" Robin simply said, "To save his life." He was clearly not thinking about his own well-being going into a losing battle. "But you could have been gentler about it." Zoro then replied, "No." He made his mind up, there was no stopping him. Knocking out him was the only way to stop him from going and making it more complicated than it already is. The two pirates then looked at each other and began a silent conversation. Finally, after a while, Zoro relented and said, "Fine, let's go." Robin smirked a bit and said, "All I'm saying is to go and watch him, making sure he's okay." The swordsman scoffed, "Knowing you just jump in to protect him." Robin smiled and said, "You don't even know half of it." She then said, "Come on Nami, let's go." She stopped looking at where Nami was. She looked at Zoro, who simply shrugged. She then did the same and began to walk with Zoro, knowing she'll cross paths with the girl again. Unknown to them, the girl had merely hidden behind a corner during their silent conversation, and waited for them to leave. Now in the clear she said, "Great, let's go get some treasure." After a while walking around, Nami managed to reach a small which seemed to have two guards standing in front of it. She smirked before slowly walked around the house. She then found a way to the roof. She then took out her staff and jumped down on the two guards. The first one was knocked out cold, but the second guard managed to get out of the way. He then tried to attack Nami, only for her to dodge and smack him on the back of the head, causing to trip forward. He then came back up and unsheathed the sword, only for his effort to become meaningless as she hit his hand, causing to let go of the sharp weapon. She then promptly gave him a smack on the forehead, followed a hit to the neck before delivering a harsh kick to groan, causing him to squeak in pain, ending her assault with a staff to the side of the head, knocking him out of cold. She then proceeded to walk to take both knocked out men and hiding them. She then wore a tattered pirate's clothes and began her acting as she walked to the front of the house and knocked on it, saying, Help, the thieves. They attacked us." The door was then opened to one of the buggy's men, who took her inside and asked, "The pirates? Where are they?" He needed to know in case they decided to attack the house, because if the money is gonna, buggy is gonna have his head. "I don't know, they attacked us, and I ran away," she told him. But then the pirate stopped a little and thought about something, and said, "Say, now that you mention it, where the two guards that are outside are?" She began to sweat nervously, clearly not ready for this question, and tried to lie her way through this. "I don't know, maybe the thieves beat them." He raised an eyebrow and asked, "Then why didn't they try to take the money then?" Nami then began to question if this guy was actually a pirate. He seemed too intelligent for her taste, but then again, even a broken clock can be correct twice a day. Before she could think of something to say, he asked a question that made her go into hyperdrive. "Now that I took a good look, did I see you from somewhere?" "No, I don't think so," she said as she began to find a way out of this very frustrating situation. She tried to reach her staff to knock him out before he recognized her, but then he looked at her and said, Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure, okay," he said before turning around and walking to the treasure, thinking about this girl that just appeared out of nowhere. The more he thought about, the more he felt something was wrong. Meanwhile, Nami was slowly creeping behind him, trying to knock him out, but first she wanted him to lead her to the treasure trove. Finally, when he reached the treasure trove, he knew who she was. He turned around only to see her lifting a staff in the air, aiming it at her. He then moved, rushing her, and grabbed her hand, causing to let loose of the staff. He pushed her aside as he said, "Now I remember you. You're the girl who betrayed the captain." She looked at him and mocked, "Congratulations, do you want a certificate of this achievement?" He was angry he was being mocked, but then Nami tried a different approach, as she said, "There's something I don't get, why work as Buggy's henchman when you're so smart?" He looked at her confused, meaning he took the bait. She hid her mischievous smile, and continued. "I mean, you could tell who I was and didn't fall for my trick, but your captain couldn't, so why work for him?" He then began to stutter, not able to give an answer as he began to let down his guard. I. She then moved forward using his confusion and said, "Come with me and we can be partners." She then pushed her chest to seduce him even further. To say that didn't work, it would be understatement of the century. The man then slimed goofily as he moved toward her. Nami scoffed in her mind as he moved closer to her. When he was in front of her, he said, "Now that we're partners, we should share everything," he said while he eyed her. So, he didn't get to finish that sentence as Nami kneed him in the groin, causing him to double over in pain. She then said, "Yeah, I changed my mind." She then grabbed her staff and knocked him out. She then searched him and found the keys to the safe. Smiling, she began to load her treasure. Back with Luffy, he then threw a punch at Buggy's midsection only for the pirate clown to split his body and avoid it. He looked at the clown captain before saying, "You eat a devil fruit, didn't you?" Buggy smirked and said, "What gave it away?" He laughed crazily before recomposing himself and said, "That's true. I ate the split fruit. With this fruit and my buggy balls, I'll become the Pirate King and find the legendary One Piece." Luffy then interrupted him and said, "Hey Big Nose, but I'm the next Pirate King." Buggy was torn between screaming from anger or laughing at him, but he chose the latter as a plan came to his mind. He then said while laughing, "You Pirate King, don't make me laugh. You're just a small kid who's probably way over his head. Who will you become the Pirate King?" "When I defeat you big red-nosed freak, I'm then going to become the Pirate King," Luffy answered back confidently. Buggy then smirked at the rubber boy and said, "How are you going to become Pirate King if you can't beat this?" he said as a hand he detached earlier rocketed toward the rubber boy. Buggy thought at that moment he had the rubber boy, but that didn't happen. Luffy simply sidestepped it and caught the hand, squeezing it, causing Buggy to thrash in pain. Luffy then let go of the hand, which floated to Buggy, who sneered and said, "You got lucky." Luffy smiled and exclaimed loudly, "You're going down today, clownface." Luffy then pulled his fist back and screamed, "Gum Gum Pistol." The fist then rocketed towards Buggy, who simply detached his body, avoiding the fist as it moved through him. Buggy laughed at the boy and said, "Don't you get it?" He then separated HIFY his point, "I'm untouchable," with a split. He was stopped. Luffy sent a flying fist towards his face, colliding with his nose, causing him to scream out in pain and say, "Hey, that's a cheap shot." Luffy merely shrugged and said, "I'm still a pirate, and you shouldn't let your guard down while fighting." Luffy then sent a kick to which Buggy avoided before revealing a knife from between his fingers and trying to hit Luffy, only for the rubber boy to avoid trying to deliver a heavy haymaker to the clown, who only floated away. "It seems we're even, Straw Hat. You can't get me while I can't get you. But know that I'll be the Pirate King after this, so why don't you just give up?" Buggy said while smiling. "No way, I'm the one who'll become the Pirate King," Luffy argued back. "How will become the Pirate King when you're dead?" he asked the boy before screaming, "Now." Suddenly two of his men tried to jump Luffy. Buggy smirked as he knew that this was then end of the rubber idiot who dared to mess with Buggy the clown. He was then cut out of his musings as the boy said, "Was that seriously your plan to beat me?" Both Buggy and Luffy looked at his men, who were on the ground groaning in pain, as Luffy remarked, "It's kinda sad." "How?" Buggy screamed. The rubber boy didn't even turn around yet he defeated both of them. He looked around and saw all his men on the ground either bleeding or groaning in pain. He then shouted even louder, "Seriously, how?" "Well, you have your crew and I have my crew," Luffy said as he pointed towards the roof of a house. Buggy looked and saw the same raven-haired girl from earlier and Zoro, causing to growl in frustration. "Of course you two were behind it." "Not that would have worked. He already noticed them by the time they jumped," Robin told the clown, further enraging him. "Now, let's continue," Luffy screamed as he sent a fist barreling at Buggy's face. It took the man off guard, throwing off his guard as Luffy came and stood over him saying, "Is it seriously over?" He then shrugged and walked away from Buggy as the latter jumped from the ground and said, "Like hell, this is over." He then split his body, sending toward Luffy screaming, "Split parade." The pieces went flying toward the rubber boy, who avoided them with ease, but the main was the hand behind him, which went flying toward him at high speeds as Buggy said, "Split surprise." The hand then brandished a knife aiming to strike Luffy. Buggy was thrilled that he will kill the rubber boy, only to be disappointed at what happened next. Luffy managed to grab the knife tightly, but what surprised the clown was that he caught it using his teeth. Seething in anger, Buggy tried to take the knife back, only for it to not budge. He finally let go of it, only for the rubber boy to bite on it so hard he broke into pieces. This caused Buggy to stare at him with wide eyes, unable to process what happened. Luffy then utilized this moment of distraction, sending a rubber pistol to Buggy's stomach, causing to fall downward as he clutched the offended area. He then looked at Luffy and said, "Damn you, Straw Hat." Luffy then began laughing and said, "This your fault for getting distracted in the middle of our fight." He then tried to send a gum whip at the clown's neck only for him to split himself at the last second. Buggy then looked frustrated at Luffy and said, "Don't you dare give lectures about how to fight, you brat." Both of them were back in an equally frustrating back and forth fight with Zoro and Robin watching over them. Zoro then asked, "Should we interfere or something?" Robin gently shook her head and said, "No, knowing Luffy, he's actually enjoying his fight, there's no need to rush in." Zoro looked at her and said, "Well, wake me when finishes clobbering the clown." He then quickly fell asleep. Back to fight, as Luffy now dodged out of Buggy's shoes as a knife popped out of it. However, this was only a mere distraction as a knifed hand came for beyond Luffy. Luffy managed to avoid the hand, but at the cost of his hat get implied by it. To say Luffy was angry would be the understatement of the century, as the boy was now on bloody path of the berserker. He looked at Buggy and said, "Give back my hat, that's my treasure, give it back." This quicked Buggy's interest as he looked at the hat. He managed to regain focus as a rubber arm tried to reach for the hat only for him to split his body and float in the air. Buggy then began to inspect the old tattered hat with great interest to see why it was a treasure. Only after a few moments he stopped. He looked at the fuming boy below and said, "This is your treasure." Luffy looked angrily at him as he once again demanded the return of his hat. "Yeah, that's my treasure, now give it back." Buggy then looked again at the hat as he said, "I don't get it. This hat in nothing but a bunch of straws sewn together and a red ribbon. But what's so special about?" he said as he began shaking the hat still impaled by the knives. Luffy then screamed angrily, "That hat is my treasure. That hat is my promise to become the Pirate King, so that's why it's my greatest treasure." He then stopped remembering when Shanks giving him the hat and smiled. He then looked at Buggy and said, "Now give it back." Buggy then looked at him and began laughing. "That's your treasure. Treasure is only gold and jewels. This is nothing but rubbish. But I'm going to destroy it anyway to teach what happened to those who mess with Captain Buggy." Luffy then began panicking as he said, "No, stop." As Buggy was going to rip the hat apart, a disembodied hand appeared out of his shoulder and throwing in the air towards none other than Robin, who smiled at Luffy, causing to breathe a sigh of relief. "Good, Shanks's hat is safe," he said as he wiped away a bead of sweat. Buggy heard that name, and a sneer appeared on his face. He looked at Luffy and said, "You don't that despicable red-haired Shanks, right?" Luffy looked at him in shock, but he asked, "You know Shanks?" Buggy sneered deepened even more as he said, "I knew I didn't like for a reason and now I know why. It's because you remind of that bastard." Luffy then was angered at having idle badmouths, so he yelled, "Don't talk about Shanks that way. He's the greatest pirate ever. He even gave his hat and we agreed I'd give it to him when I become Pirate King." A tick now formed on Buggy's forehead as he screamed, "Shut up. You even know what that bastard did to me." Buggy then began retelling his story. How Shanks and him were cabin boys on the same pirate ship. How one day they fought with a pirate crew and managed to find a devil fruit which Buggy faked to eat while hiding the real one in order to sell it to fund his quest to find the long-lost treasure of Captain John, which he found its map. How when he was planning to escape the ship, Shanks surprised him, causing to hide the real devil in his mouth, then surprising him again, causing him to actually eat it while losing the map. How he jumped after map fell in the ocean and he couldn't swim due to the devil fruit. And now his plans were delayed 10 years due to that bastard. Do you know why I hate him? Robin, sitting from the sidelines, said, "Wasn't it your fault you hid the fruit in your mouth?" Buggy looked at her with a vein popping out of his forehead. "I was taken by surprise." Robin could only sweat drop at his response. Buggy then said, "But now I'm here, and I will become the Pirate King and won't let anyone." He then noticed something in the corner of his eyes causing him to exclaim loudly, "Take my treasures." He shot quickly at Luffy. Said boy prepared himself for battle, but was shocked when Buggy passed by him. He looked then understood why Buggy didn't attack him. At the edge of the center of the village was Nami carrying 2 huge sacks of treasure. She was walking humming happily, using the fight as a distraction. That was the plan till Buggy began giving his life story, and noticed. It only took a second for her to notice the floating clown coming at high speeds and did what any rational person would. And it was running as fast as she can as Buggy shouted behind all the time, "Give back my treasure." Back to Luffy, he noticed that Buggy left his lower body there, so he went to it, and decided to try something. Nami finally, after running for a couple of moments, tripped and fell to the ground. As Buggy loomed above her, he then said, "End of the line, girl." He suddenly fell over with tears falling from his eyes, and began rolling on the ground with his face contracted in agony. Nami dared to look over the pain-filled upper half and saw what caused Buggy to have this type of reaction. Over with his lower body, Luffy decided to kick in the groin. She didn't know how to address this other than that was a dirty move. Buggy on the ground began to mumble in pain, "He crushed my little Buggy." Nami then decided to disappear again until Buggy caught her again, and said, "Give me back my treasure." Nami looked at him with a, "Are you serious?" look and said, "No way, I found it first and it's my treasure now." Buggy yelled, "What kind of skewed logic is that? That's my treasure, I worked day and night to collect it." Nami had a tick mark form on her head cause this pirate said he worked hard for this treasure. In other words, that meant he stole from a lot of innocent people. No way, she gave him a kick top the head. This caused Buggy to growl at her and then yelled, I will take back my treasure, even if that's the last thing I'll ever do. He then jumped into the air and screamed, split split parade, causing both his lower and upper half to split and go to Nami to grab her, causing the girl to run away in fear. Back with Luffy, he noticed something interesting. He saw that Buggy's feet were still on the ground and walking normally, which meant that they couldn't float, so he grabbed one of them and smiled. Nami and Buggy were now in full mouse and cat game mode, with Nami running around and Buggy following her. She looked around, saw that a scene that caused to scream in fear, which was Buggy laughing like a madman. The reason to that was that Luffy have actually managed to start tickling one of Buggy's feet. As Buggy laughed loudly, he tried to speak, stop doing that, ha 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 ha. Nami then heard Buggy scream out in pain as if someone just put him through the ringer. She looked at him and saw a face full of pain looking back at her. This time Luffy decided to slam Buggy's feet into the ground, causing to cry out in pain. Buggy now looked at the Luffy and said, stop doing that. This is our fight, so stop running away from it, you coward, Luffy said as he readied himself for his fight. Why you? Buggy seethed in anger at being called a coward, but swallowed it as he said, I'll fight you. He then jumped toward Nami, managing to catch her off guard, causing her to throw one of her treasure bags. As soon as I'm finished with her. He then jumped toward Nami and said, got you, Nami screamed, but then heard a scream, gum gum whip. She then saw Buggy get swept aside by a rubber foot and get thrown into the town center's fountain. She looked at Luffy, who gave her thumbs, to which she shakily returned. She then saw Buggy jump from the fountain and saw, damn you, Straw Hat, stop interfering with me. Your fight is with me. Now come on, let's continue what we started, Luffy said as he aimed a rubber pistol, hitting Buggy straight in the nose. Having had enough, Buggy screamed, enough? He then calmed down and said, now, I'll use my ultimate technique, he said, quipping Luffy's interest. Split split festival, he screamed, but for Luffy it seemed like the parade won until the different pieces started to rotate around him. He then noticed one coming flying straight towards him, and then the second followed by the third, and so on. Now, Straw Hat, Buggy asked sarcastically, do you still want to fight the great Captain Buggy? Shut up, big nose. Luffy yelled at him, I'm still going to kick your butt. Shut up, my nose isn't that big. Yes, it is, Luffy said as he avoided another piece which had a knife pop out of it. Outside the action, Nami sat on the ground trying to catch her breath. She was thankful that the pirate boy helped her, but it was time for her to call it a day. She stood up to leave, but someone grabbed her. She feared the worst, but it turned out to be the pirate's girlfriend. I need your help, Robin stated. What? Nami said, confused, then gained her senses and asked, what? You heard me. I have a plan to stop Buggy, but I need your help, Robin told her. Nami looked at her like she lost her mind. Sure, she helped them a couple of times, but it was due to her better human nature. Was this pirate girl really expecting her to help them? Deciding not to get on the girl's bad side, she decided to use a logical question, why should I? Robin smiled. She expected that from her, I'll give you my treasure, if. Suddenly she was grabbed in a hug as Nami said, wow, I love you, sister. Robin could help but laugh at the girl's greed. Okay, so here's my plan. Robin began to tell her plan as Nami listened carefully, wanting to have the treasure more than ever. As Buggy continued his assault on Luffy, he knew that the time connect his body is coming closer, so he said, tired yet Straw Hat. This is fun, Luffy said, smiling. This isn't supposed to be fun, Buggy shouted in anger. Enough, time to end this. He began to call his body parts back, now, I will defeat with another move. But he felt something strange when his body parts returned. He was shorter than the boy. That didn't make any sense. He then looked at himself, and noticed that he was only hands, feet and a head. He yelled, what happened to my body? A cough caught his attention as he looked to the side and saw all his body parts caught in a net made of arms, as Nami was tying them together to make sure they don't escape. Okay, Buggy, he then looked at Luffy, who his arms stretching behind him. Let's wrap this up, he said as both arms came back full speed, gum gum bazooka. The arms then made impact with Buggy as he was sent flying into the distance as he screamed, damn you, Straw Hat. Luffy then looked at his girlfriend, who came and gave him a hug and said, congratulations on your very first fight against another pirate. Luffy and then said, come on, let's go. He then looked around and said, where's Zoro? Robin said, don't worry. He's just sleeping in the corner over there. Luffy then went and grabbed him and started shaking him to make him up. Zoro, wake up. We have to leave, I won the fight. Luffy yelled at him. Zoro opened his eyes and punted his captain over the head and said, I'm up. Luffy, shaking himself from the sudden punch, looked at Nami and said, come on Nami, let's go. The girl smacked her forehead, asking herself why didn't she go away when she had the chance. Instead she had a better and said, I won't join your crew, but I will help you out with navigation for a while. Call it a partnership. Luffy only heard from that, navigation, and said, yay, we have a navigator now. Temporarily partner, Nami retorted. But Luffy didn't listen, causing to drop to the ground and question her life choices. But what was done was done. There was no turning back. She looked at Robin and saw her smiling at her. Nami asked, "Is he always like this?" Robin nodded. "How do you even like him?" Robin simply said, "Let's just say, if it wasn't for him, my life story would have taken a darker turn." This caused Nami to shiver, recognizing the seriousness in the girl's tone. She then stood up and gave Robin a bag of her loot while going to bring the one she lost when running from Buggy. Not a moment passed when she returned to the pirate trio until noises filled the town center. She looked with the others and saw an angry mob with different weapons yelling at them. "Are you with Buggy?" Luffy, being the wise person he is, said, "No." "Then who are you?" asked one man. "We're pirates," replied Luffy. This caused Nami to bonk over, "Don't tell them that." She decided to ignore the sudden feeling of dread as she looked back at Robin, who gave her a sharp look, not appreciating her manhandling her boyfriend. "Were you the guys who knocked out our mayor?" Deciding to take action, Nami tried to say, "No," but a certain moss-headed swordsman beat her to the punch. "Yes." This also earned a bonk to the head. "Shut up, are you trying to kill us?" The townspeople then agreed on one thing: get them. This made all four start running through the town and the alleyways with the people hot on their tails. However, during the chase, the sound of barking grabbed Luffy's attention. "Who them?" "Follow me," he said as he entered an alleyway. Having no choice, they followed him, only to meet by Shoo Shoo. Moments later, the townspeople came, but the dog started screaming at them, causing them to stop as they couldn't run through him. At the docks of Orangetown, the four reached their ships. After an encounter with the clown trio from earlier, they prepared to live, but one thing had to be settled. Nami looked at Robin and said, "Where's my treasure?" Robin was shocked for a moment, but smiled and said, "It's all yours," as she pointed to a part of her boat. Nami looked with excitement, but was disappointed with what she saw. It was books. Only books. In other words, she was tricked. "You tricked me," she said in sadness. Robin replied, "I never said my treasure was gold. To me, knowledge is treasure, so I didn't technically lie." Nami looked at her, hurt due to the technicality and how she was fooled, but saw a sight that put a smile on her face as she found a new victim to take money from. On the pirate trio's boat was Luffy, crying over his damaged hat. Once he saw it, Nami came to him and said, "Oh, you poor thing, your hat is damaged, isn't it?" He nodded. "So how about we make a deal? I fix it and you pay." He was about to say, "Yes," but Robin intervened and said, "I'll fix Luffy," throwing a sharp look to Nami, who pouted at her scheme being fouled. She looked at Robin and said, "You're no fun," and then jumped on her boat. Robin shook her head as she snuggled into Luffy, and began to doze off as both boats began to sail away. Everyone then heard a voice calling out for them. It was Mayor Boodle, who said, "I know what you did for my village. Thank you for everything, and thank for the money." Robin smiled as she looked over to Zoro, who was already fast asleep, Luffy, who waving at the mayor, and Nami, who was fuming. Nami looked at her and said, "Why did you them my treasure?" Robin said calmly, "I couldn't just leave them without something to fix their village. But smile, you got at least half of your treasure." She finished as the girl slumped in defeat, saying that didn't make her feel any better. Robin could only laugh at her reaction. The next day, on another island, a small village was welcoming the morning, but a voice rang through it yelling, "The pirates are coming, the Lion Captain." A couple of days had passed since the departure of the crew from Orangetown, and now they were wandering the sea, looking for their next destination. However, one member was seriously reviewing their life choices. "Shut the hell up," Nami screeched like a banshee at the top of her lungs while showing shark teeth to Luffy. The rubber boy has been asking for the last 2 days non-stop when they reach the Grand Line to sail into new adventures together. "What?" Luffy asked, dumbly ignorant of the temporary navigator's rage. "I was just asking when we will get to the Grand Line," he said, and then put his hand to his chin, saying, "Isn't that supposed to be your job, being a navigator and all that?" Nami facepalmed and tried to explain the situation as calmly as possible to the rubber captain. "I'm not your navigator. I only tagged along for a little while, get that through your thick head." She then turned to Robin, who was sitting while playing with Luffy's hair, and asked, "Seriously, what do you see in him?" Robin gave her a weird look that said, "How can't I like him?" Only for Nami to say, "Was your island so empty of men that you dated the first guy you saw?" Robin merely ignored this question before saying, "What I do with my love life isn't yours to criticize." She then added, "Let's begin with today's lesson, shall we?" The orange head nodded as Robin jumped onto Nami's boat for Nami to teach her navigation. During these last few days, Nami began teaching Robin how to navigate after Robin asked her. At first, the orange head was hesitant, but then Robin bribed with some of the money she had, so she agreed. As they were studying, Zoro woke up from his daily nap and asked, "Have we reached land yet?" Nami retorted, "No, what do you think?" Then she went back to teaching Robin.
Zoro glared at her and said, "Wake me up when we reach land." This got him a lazy bum from Nami.
Luffy then asked, "When do we reach the Grand Line?" Nami was about to shout at him, but Robin calmly told him, "Luffy dear, we won't reach the Grand Line at least till several days. Furthermore, we need a bigger ship to sail the Grand Line, those won't day." Don't you remember what Saul told us about the Grand Line? Luffy nodded his head while saying, you got a point there, Robin. Nami blankly stared at Robin, who just shut up the rubber boy while he almost gave her a cardiac arrest on several occasions. How? She asked in a whisper. How what? Robin replied. This, she said while pointing to Luffy. Be more specific, Robin said, enjoying teasing the orange head. Don't you play dumb with me, Missy. How were you able to shut him up? Nami demanded to know. Robin giggled a little before answering. Luffy is very passionate about his dream, so I merely told him some requirements for him to achieve it. The girl sighed, knowing she won't get more out of the girl, so she turned to Luffy and spoke in a serious tone. She's right. Those boats will take you so far. You need a bigger, sturdier one. So all we need is a boat. A big one, then we can go to the Grand Line. He hummed a little and then said, then it's settled. The next island we reach we'll find a big boat and some supplies, then you sail us to the Grand Line. He finished. The last part was said while he was pointing at Nami. The girl wanted to scream but sucked it in and breathed out calmly and said, yeah, that's pretty much it. The boy then began looking around for an island while talking about all the adventures they were going to have together.
Nami looked at Robin and said, you can do so much better than him. You're so educated, so refined, why are going out with this vulgar creature?
You have no idea how much I owe him, and I know him better than you, so I will say this for the last time, Robin said in a calm voice, before it took a more eerily tone, stay out of my love life. This caused Nami to be frightened as she knew she was actually trespassing on something she shouldn't have gone to. She raised her hand and said quickly, okay, I'm sorry, no need to get angry. Robin was about to speak when Luffy interrupted saying, I see land on the horizon. Nami looked and actually saw land coming into view. She then said, according to my knowledge, this is Syrup Island. Cool, let's go there, Luffy said excitedly while pointing to the island. Meanwhile, Nami sighed at the rubber man's childish behavior, whereas Robin joined her boyfriend on the boy while also laughing at his behavior. Back on the island, a man was looking at the pirates with a small telescope. He then put the magnifying item beside while he looked at his three companions and said, are you ready to protect the island? The three individuals then screamed together, yes, Captain. The man smiled before saying, then let's get ready for them. Prepare the defense tactics.
Back to the four pirates, Luffy was jumping up and down on the boat as he saw the land coming closer. He then grabbed Zoro and shook him awake. Wake up, Zoro. We're almost there.
Said man then punted the boy on the head saying, never wake me up again like this. Luffy quickly issued an apology to the angry swordsman. Zoro then began stretching and looked at Robin saying, so we finally reached land. Felt like ever. Robin gave him an empty look and said, you were asleep through most of it. Sleeping is tiring, Zoro replied, causing Robin to sweat drop. She then noticed the boat coming to the shore of the island, so she said, shore ahead. The boat then crashed into the shore of the island. Robin was grabbed by Luffy to keep her from falling while Zoro sighed at the lover's antics saying, get a room, you too. He then jumped to the shore and looked around. To him, he highly doubted this island will have a boat for them to buy. Though he was asleep, he did open his eyes every now and then. He saw the island from afar, and to say he wasn't impressed would be the lie of the century.
So this island will be the solution for our problems. He stopped for a moment before saying, can't say I'm impressed. Are you sure that it may have a boat to sell?
Nami shrugged her shoulders and told him, I never said it has a boat to sell. I just said its name. She said as she left her boat, smiling at the feeling of between her feet. Luffy then jumped while holding Robin and said, who cares? Let's go see the island. I want to know if they have food. I'm hungry. Are you always hungry? Nami said while pinching her nose. Aren't I supposed to be? Luffy asked, confused. Nami was about to retort when she felt something hit the sand near her. She jumped back and took out her staff and said, who is here? Luffy then felt also something hit the ground near him, so he jumped back. He began to try to dodge whatever was being shot at him. He dodged multiple times before taking a fighting position, causing Zoro to ready his swords and Robin to use her power to check the area. Who is there? Come and fight like a man, you coward. Then everyone heard a rustle in the bushes up a hill in front of the beach and looked up to see someone come out of them. The newcomer was a boy who was no older than Luffy. He wore a brown overall with yellow boats. He also had a yellow checkered cloth tied around his head with curly black hair peeking out. The most distinctive feature about him was his long nose. The man was also holding a slingshot while also holding a slingshot. The man looked at the pirates and laughed loudly before he said, leave this island, you damned pirates, or you shall feel my wrath. Though he wasn't very convincing since he was practically quivering with fear with his knees shaking like a leaf. Oh, yeah, and who are you anyway? Luffy yelled back at him. You don't know who I am, the man exclaimed loudly. He then laughed and said, you poor fool, then you came to your death at the hands of the great Captain Usopp. Oh, and what's so great about you? Luffy shouted, causing the newly named Usopp to flinch before he composed himself again. What's so great? I guess it's fair for you not to show fear of the GRSOPP, said while pointing at himself and said, I, Captain Usopp, the destroyer of beasts. the conqueror of islands. A man who took on giants, so tell me, are you ready to face me? Nami, Robin, and Zoro only stared blankly at Usopp, who began to sweat profusely, feeling threatened by them. None of the three believed him, seeing him as either a very huge lair or someone who is delusional to a huge extent. But alas, Luffy actually believed him and started to jump up and down happily, saying, "You're so awesome, but I'm still going to this island, and you can't stop." Luffy then smiled, "That leaves us with one choice. We have to fight." This scared Usopp to no extent as he swallowed a huge lump in his throat, fear evident in his eyes. Usopp then shook his head and said, "Good luck reaching me. For my millions of soldiers will fight for me and you'll be defeated before you even put a dent in them." Robin quirked an eyebrow at the Usopp statement. She was 100% he didn't have millions of men. First, due to the small size of the island that couldn't host such a number of people. Second, the man is clearly lying to intimidate them to leave. And third, her devil fruit giving a view of Usopp's men's true number. She looked at Luffy, who was ecstatic to have such a fight. Luffy then looked at him and said excitedly, "I'm still going to fight them. Bring them on, I'll defeat all of them." Usopp couldn't believe his ears. Was this guy insane? Did he actually think he can defeat millions of men? He was so shocked. He screamed out loud, "Are you insane? You can't survive against my men." Nami, having enough of this game, looked Usopp dead in the eyes and said, "Are sure you have millions of followers, because I think you're lying." Usopp then panicked as he said, "Damn it, how did you find out?" No one but Luffy was surprised that he was lying, while the latter was deflating due to the sheer amount of disappointment. Nami then smirked at him and said, "I didn't, you just told us." Usopp then fell over before jumping back up and saying, "Well, it's true that I don't have millions of men, but I have strong followers who are ready to die for me." Then suddenly 6 flags popped from behind Usopp and started to wave back and forth, while Usopp was laughing at them. Robin was secretly giggling at the silly antics of this Usopp due to her knowing that Usopp only had around 3 small children fighting for him when she watched them with her powers. One of the children was wearing a small vest with blue pants. He also had a very distinct hairstyle that made him look like an onion. The second boy was wearing a black shirt with red pants and a hat on his head with purple hair. The boy had a very distinct hairstyle in which a part of his hair came out the top of his hat, making him look like a carrot. The last was wearing a yellow shirt with blue pants. He also had a unique hairstyle like a pepper bell. This time it was Robin who ruined the fun for Usopp when she said, Now, great captain, there is no need to lie to us. I know that you only have 3 children with you." Usopp began sweating as she said this. Then suddenly, 3 screams were heard as 3 children ran from behind the bushes, and ran away from fear as Usopp screamed, "Hey guys, don't leave me alone." Luffy looked at him with a blank expression. He then said, "Man, you are a coward. Stop lying, we're leaving from here." While Luffy began to walk away, Usopp stood there shocked that he was called a coward. He was brave warrior of the sea, and his honor was attacked, so he had to defend it. He lifted his slingshot and screamed, "Hey, who are you calling a coward?" This drew Luffy's attention. Usopp then said, "I'm Usopp, the brave warrior of the sea. I won't accept to be called a coward by you. Prepare to be defeated," he said as he lifted his slingshot to shoot Luffy, who smirked at him. Luffy then took a more serious pose as he looked Usopp dead in the eyes. He then said, "Are you ready to use that weapon?" Usopp looked confused at Luffy's words as he can only say, "What?" Luffy then said again, "I asked you if you're ready to use that weapon." Robin smiled and said, "He's right, you shouldn't point that at us as if it's a toy unless you're willing to use it." Luffy then added, "You just pointed that slingshot at me. That raises the question if you're actually going to use it. Or going to put your life on the line? This weapon isn't made to be played with around, so tell her you're going to use it." Usopp then began to sweat uncomfortably as he shook in his boots from fear. Seeing this, Zoro smirked and said, "Look here kid, this is what pirates are." He then raised his sword, pointing it at him with Nami on the side, feeling how tense the situation became. Usopp then fell to his boots and he let the slingshot fall from his hands as he said calmly, "So this is what real pirates are." Luffy then smiled at Usopp and said, "Calm down Usopp, we won't hurt you or anyone in your village." Luffy then looked him up and down and said, "Are you Yaosp's son?" This caused Usopp's ears to perk up as he heard his father's names, and he asked, "Do you know my old man?" "Oh yeah, he visited my island with his crew when I was younger, and he told all types of stories about you. You also look a lot like him," Luffy told him. Usopp then jumped up and tried to go down the hill to talk to Luffy, only for him to fall over and roll down till reach the bottom of the hill. Luffy then walked over to him with Robin, the latter asking him if he was okay. Usopp jumped and said, "Yeah, I'm good." He then turned to Luffy and asked him, "Can you tell me more about my dad?" "Yeah, he was a great guy." He began to speak as a loud growl interrupted him, so Luffy asked the boy, "Is there any restaurant here so I can eat?" "Yeah, of course, great then let's go. This way," Usopp said as he led the group. After a short walk, the group of 5 entered the village, which seemed a classical small village. As they continued to walk, Robin noticed something odd. Every time that Usopp greeted someone they would reply with a grunt or odd looks. This caused her to ask him, Usopp, the people of the village don't seem to like that much, do they? What? No, they like me. They're just annoyed with a prank I pulled lately. Usopp clarified. And what did you exactly do? Zoro inquired. I ran around a couple of times saying the pirates are coming, Usopp admitted. Define a couple of times to me, this time Nami asked him. Ever since I was little, Usopp said in a low voice, but the others heard him. So you were basically pranking them ever since you were a kid? Robin summarized. Yeah, you can say that, he said with a laugh. He then saw the restaurant and exclaimed, oh look, we arrived at the restaurant. Let's go in. The group of 5 entered the small restaurant as the owner greeted Usopp first with a grunt which turned into a small when he saw customers with him. He ushered for them to follow him to a table that housed a couple of seats. Usopp then spread his arms as he declared loudly, welcome to the best restaurant the island has to offer. Luffy then stated bluntly, I think it's the only restaurant on the entire island. This caused Usopp to slump forward as he murmured under his breath, there's no need to be so blunt about it. Robin then gave Luffy a disapproving look, whose head sunk and apologized, sorry, Usopp. Usopp feeling happy then yelled, let's get the best food here. He then looked at Luffy and said, do you know Luffy that the meat here was brought by me? Really? Yeah, I fought vicious seekings and huge monsters to bring it here. That's so awesome. Robin just laughed as the owner came to take their requests. I want a cup of coffee, and a small piece of cake please. I want meat and lots of it. I want sake. I want some orange juice. I want a sandwich. As they waited for their food to arrive, Usopp looked at Luffy and said, Luffy, you said you know my father, so can you tell me about him? Luffy nodded his head, sure thing, your dad is awesome. He sails around with a good shooter. He's really strong and he used to tell me stories about you. He also asked me that if I'm ever going to start a pirate crew that I should invite you to join. Robin then said, that if you want to join us that is. She knew how her boyfriend wanted new crewmates, but she didn't want him to force people to join them. Sure they technically blackmailed Zoro, but there was no other way. Usopp then put his hands behind his head and said, man, I always knew my dad was great, but I didn't think he was sailing with one of the strongest pirates out there. He then added, I want to become a pirate too, so I won't join your crew. For you see, I'm already the captain of the Usopp pirates. You mean the 3 cowardly children back at the beach? Doesn't seem like much. Zoro spoke causing the boy to deflate. Be nice, Nami said as she whacked his head. Then the food arrived for the group of 5. Luffy immediately began to dig in, as the others ate their food slowly. The owner then approached them and asked for the bill, so Luffy pointed his arm at Usopp and said, he will pay the bill. The boy was extremely shocked, but couldn't say no. He only sighed as he pulled out the money and gave the owner some money, as he looked at Luffy and muttered, that's really low. Luffy only laughed before he returned to eating. Robin shook her head at him with a smile on her face, remembering that when she and Luffy used to date on Dawn Island in the restaurants of Goa Kingdom, they used to dine and dash. This was actually the first time that they actually paid for their food. She picked a couple of bills from her pocket and gave them to Usopp saying, don't feel bad Usopp, here's some money back. Thanks, don't mention it, Robin said. She then remembered something. She had to ask him if the island had somewhere that sells ships so they can buy one. She looked at Usopp and was about to ask him when Luffy beat her to the punch. Hey, Usopp, he said, drawing the long-nosed boy's attention. Do you know anywhere we can go to so we can buy a ship? Usopp looked at him as he began to stroke his chin. Let me think for a bit. Usopp then looked at him and said, sorry guys, but our island is small so there isn't any place that sells ships. Luffy then pointed outside the window and said, what about that place? Everyone looked and saw a fancy-looking mansion on top of a hill. This caused Usopp to panic as he shook his hands violently and said, no, definitely not there. He then looked at his arm as if there was a watch and said, well, look at the time, I have to go somewhere, bye. He then ran outside of the restaurant with a huge amount of speed. Everyone looked at him as he retreated away, probably going to the mansion. Robin broke the silence saying, he's definitely hiding something. Zoro then said, most probably, it has to do something with that mansion. Nami then added with her eyes turning in money signs, you don't think he is super rich and hiding his wealth? This caused the previous 2 to give a worried look. Luffy then gave in his 2 cents, we'll definitely go there later, but first, the 3 looked at him interested in what he was about to say. Let's continue eating. This caused various reactions as Nami groaned. Zoro shared the boy's sentiment as he drank his sake, and Robin giggled as she ate and fed her boyfriend with a disembodied hand. Currently, with Usopp, he ran quickly from the restaurant to his destination. It was none other than the mansion that Luffy saw. Usopp looked around for a bit before saying, coast is clear. I hope Kaya is ready today. He then walked to a wall covered by grass. He then pushed a rock and entered the back garden of the house. The boy stood in the garden, and he then climbed a tree. He sat on a branch that faced a window of the mansion as he yelled, Kaya, come out, it's me. Back with the 4 pirates, they each sat eating their food, with each of them almost done, when a ruckus interrupted the peace. They all looked and saw the 3 children from before come in while holding 3 wooden swords as they demanded, "Give our captain back." Luffy then reclined back on his chair patting his stomach as he said, "Man, that was a good meal, I'm stuffed." The 3 boys paled as they looked at the young pirate, as one of them asked the other 2, "You don't think that they?" The green-haired one then shouted, "Where's our captain? Didn't you hear him?" They looked turned to Zoro, who had a very menacing look on his face as he said, "Your captain was delicious, we ate him." The color drained from the boys' faces as they heard that, but the voice of soft giggling made them look in Robin's direction. "He sure was tasty." She then gave them a creepy smile, "But I can always go for dessert." The boys then promptly screamed as they looked at the 4. They looked at Nami, who was softly laughing, and screamed, "Cannibals." The girl took this badly and yelled, "Why are you looking at me?" She then punted each boy on the head. As the boy regained their composure, Robin was the first to speak as she told them that their captain was safe and sound. It took a bit of convincing, but the boys eventually believed them. Currently, they were walking outside the restaurant, so Robin decided to ask them about the mansion. "Boys, do you know anything about that mansion over there?" The boys, who were introduced as Onion for the brown-haired boy, Carrot for the hat-wearing boy, and Pepper for the green-haired boy, said in unison, "That's where Miss Kaya lives." "Who?" Luffy asked as he tilted his head. "Kaya," Carrot answered, "she's a friend of our captain. But she's super sick, so captain goes there every day, and tells her lies," Onion told them. "Lie to her?" Nami asked confused. "Yeah, miss. Kaya is always alone and she became kinda depressed due to her sickness, so our captain goes to her house and tells her lies to make her feel better," Pepper explained. "Well, that's really nice of him," Robin said. She was also sure of something else, but that could wait a little while. "So can you take us to the mansion?" Luffy asked. The children nodded at him and led the way. Soon enough they were all in front of the mansion. However, the children took them to the backside since the boys were sure that no one would open it for them. They stood beside a wall, and Pepper explained, "Captain told us that there was a secret entrance to this place, but he never specified where." Then Luffy said, "Then we took the high road." The children were about to ask what he meant as his arms stretched and took them by surprise. Luffy then coiled his arms around everyone as he shouted, "Gum Gum Rocket." Everyone was then launched into the air and above the wall with Luffy and Robin's laughter, and the other's shriek of horror can be heard. On the other side of the wall, Usopp sat as he talked with Kaya, telling one of his stories. In this one, he was fighting a giant goldfish in it. Kaya was a blonde-haired girl with very pale skin due to her sickness. She also wore a white nightgown. She was currently sitting on the porch of her window listening to Usopp's story, and then she asked him, "And then what you did, Usopp?" Well, Usopp began to peek as a sound caught his attention. "Do you hear that?" The girl nodded her head. They looked toward the sky as the sounds became closer and closer by the minute. They were then greeted by 3 children falling on the bushes of the garden. Zoro falling headfirst into the ground, Nami hitting the tree and sliding off it to the ground. And finally, Luffy bounced harmlessly off the ground before he opened his arms and caught Robin, who thanked him for the save. Luffy then looked at Usopp. "Hi, Usopp." Usopp flinched as Kaya asked him, "Usopp, do you know these people?" Usopp the liar, he has quickly created one on the spot as he told her, "Well yeah, these people are fans of mine and they want to join my crew," he said as he pointed to himself. Luffy then said, "Not really, I'm Monkey D. Luffy." He then looked at Kaya and asked, "Are you, Kaya?" The girl in Quenodding, so Luffy tried to ask her if she had a boat, only for a voice to interrupt him before ever beginning in the first place. What is going on here? Everyone then looked to see a middle-aged man wearing a suit. He also had slicked back green hair. In addition, he wore small glasses that he continuously adjusted with the back of his right hand. He was also the caretaker of Kaya. Kaya then looked and smiled at the newcomer and said, "Oh Klahadore, Usopp was introducing me to his friends." Luffy looked at the man and asked, "Hello, do you think we a ship we can use? We have money to buy it?" "No, and even if we have I won't give it to you," Klahadore then said. Kaya was shocked that her caretaker would be as rude. "Klahadore, how could you be?" Now Miss Kaya, I suggest that you rest in your room while I deal with that filthy liar and his companions." Klahadore. Usopp, taken aback by Klahadore's words, said, "What do you mean filthy? I'm trying to help Kaya while you keep her trapped in this prison you made for her. Or saying that you, the son of a filthy pirate, know what's better for my charge than I do." Usopp flinched as he heard the caretaker insult his father, whom he held dearly to his heart. He looked at him with hate in his eyes and asked, "What did you call my father?" "A filthy pirate who ran away from his family to sail in the sea instead of taking care of them. No wonder you turned out the way you are. The apple truly doesn't fall free away from the tree." Klahadore continued to insult him. Kaya, having had enough of this, shouted, "Klahadore, that's enough. Apologize to Usopp right now." "Why should I apologize to someone who's only trying to harm you, Miss Kaya? I'm only doing my job here, which is to protect you from such figures." He then turned to Usopp and said, "Why are you here? Are you here to seduce Miss Kaya? Or to steal her money? Truly, you're just as despicable as your father is." Usopp, who had had enough of insults, jumped down from the tree saying, "Listen here, you can insult me as much as you want, but keep my dad out of it." "So what are going to do now? Lie by telling us that your dad is a sailing businessman? Or perhaps say that he is a sailor? Whatever you say, it won't change the truth that your father is nothing but—" He was suddenly cut off as Usopp's fist collided with his face, causing the others to be shocked and Kaya to gasp and mutter his name under her breath. Usopp then grabbed his jacket and said, "Listen here and listen well. I will never lie about my dad. He's a brave warrior of the sea." Klahadore laughed at him. "Brave warrior of the sea? Your father will always be nothing but S. And you aren't so different from him after all, resorting to violence at the drop of a hat. Something to be expected from the son of Pirate S." Usopp was about to punch him again when he heard Kaya yell at him, "Usopp, please stop." Usopp hesitantly let go of him, as he heard Kaya yell at her butler to apologize, who once again refused to. He then looked at Usopp and yelled, "Now you and your companions get out of here, and never come back again." Usopp simply muttered under his breath, "This is the last time you ever see me here, anyone." He then walked away as the children followed him. Klahadore looked at the pirate trio and said, "Well, what are you waiting for? Leave now." Luffy shrugged and looked at Kaya and said, "Maybe, we can talk tomorrow." He walked by Klahadore, who scoffed at him. Zoro followed Luffy's lead. Robin lingered for a bit longer looking at the butler as if she was trying to remember where she saw him before, and then she left. In Kaya's room, the girl sat on her bed as she cried at how poorly things went. She then heard her door open as the butler walked in. She then asked him, "Why did you do that, Klahadore? Why do you always Usopp?" "Miss Kaya," the man said softly, "I'm only doing what's best for you." "But Usopp, he may seem like that, but I'm worried he might cause harm," he said before his face contracted into sadness, "and I can't imagine a world where you are harmed." He then began to say how she was entrusted to him by her late parents, how he is only doing the right thing after the family took him in when crashed on the island, how they spent time together, and how he took care of her. "But still, Usopp is my friend. Can you at least try to be nice to him?" Kaya asked. I see that, but he isn't allowed to come here anymore," the man said as stood and walked off, shocking the girl. Back with the group, Nami, Robin, Zoro, Luffy and two of the children stood beside a fence as Zoro said, "Well, that was a complete bust." "Well, I agree, but the butler could have tried to be a little bit hospitable," Robin said. "What do you expect? You just flew into the garden. No one under normal circumstances would welcome you." Nami yelled at them, though she herself was kinda sad that they didn't get a ship. Luffy then sighed as he looked at the children and asked them, "Do you know where Usopp is?" "Yeah, he has a special spot where he goes to when he's mad on the beach," Pepper said as he pointed to the beach. "Thanks, I'll go find him," Luffy said before he walked off. The group of five sat as they watched Luffy go further in the distance till Nami spoke. "So what are we going to do now?" She sat on top of the fence while softly kicking the ground. Robin looked at her and said, "I don't know. Maybe I could go and talk with the butler to hear us out." Sure, she hated him for the way they treated her, but she was taught that hard gives results. "You're wasting your time." Zoro interrupted her. "It's clear the guy doesn't even want to see us, let alone hear us." He saw the man, and could tell by just looking at him that he wasn't willing to listen. "I also want to have a second look at him," Robin said, shocking everyone. Noticing the weird looks she was getting, she clarified further, I think I saw him somewhere, but I can't exactly point my finger on it. I think I saw him in the newspaper once," Robin said as he tried to remember why he looked so familiar. Now that you mention it, he kinda seemed familiar for me too," Zoro said. "Was he once a wanted person?" "Not possible. He would have known he was a bounty hunter for a while, so he would have an idea." "Are you guys sure you aren't being paranoid?" Nami asked them because she didn't want an innocent person to suffer. "Sure, he was rude as hell, but that didn't make him a bad guy." "Yeah, I'm sure," but Robin began to speak but was cut short by Onion screaming, "Guys, this is bad. A weird guy walking backward is coming in our direction," the boy told in a huge panic. Pepper then jumped on his feet and said, "Are you crazy? There's no such thing as a guy walking backward." "Yeah," Carrot agreed with the former. "But it's true, I saw him," Onion insisted. The three boys then went into an argument on who is right or wrong, with the girls watching them with amusement. This was only stopped by Zoro, who said, "You guys are too noisy. Be quiet, I want to sleep." He then laid down on the ground and tried to get some rest, when something, or rather someone, caught his attention. He looked at Onion and asked him, "You said you saw a guy walking backward, right?" The boy nodded. He then pointed his finger and asked, "What that him?" The boy looked at the man who came at a stop when he was next to the group, and said, "Yeah, that's him." The man was about Zoro's. He wore a white vest with a blue overcoat on it. He also wore blue pants. He had heart-shaped sunglasses, and also had his beard shaped in an odd fashion like a pharaoh. He also wore a blue hat. The man stopped and said, "Who are you calling weird? I'm not weird at all." The boys then responded in unison, "Yes, yes, you are weird." The man then screamed, "I'm not weird. I'm just a passing hypnotist." Robin interrupted saying, "A hypnotist? Yeah, I'm Django the hypnotist," the man answered. Robin to say more, but the children were interested and demanded to see a demonstration. Django said, "And you fools think I will show my skills? You truly are delusional." Then in a 180 turn, he stood in front of the children with a circular pendant that was tied to a string telling the children to stare at it, while Zoro in the background asked if he was being serious. Django looked at the children and said, "When I say 1, 2, Django, you'll be put to sleep." He began, 1, 2, Django. The trick worked, but the unexpected happened, as Django himself was also affected by the trick, causing Zoro to yell at him, "Where the hell did you come from?" Robin giggled at the whole display while Nami sighed, before saying, "I'm going to get supplies." "Want to come, Robin?" The black-haired girl nodded, and then they both went to get supplies, and Zoro went back to trying to get some sleep. Back at Kaya's mansion, Klahadore was walking outside the door when a voice stopped him. "Where are you going, Klahadore?" He turned to the source of the voice, and he saw his fellow co-worker Mary. Mary was a relatively short person wearing formal attire. But what stood out about him was his curly white hair and 2 ram horns coming out of his head. "I'm feeling a bit disturbed after what happened today. I'm going out for a walk to cool off," the man replied. "Oh, I hope you have a good time," Mary said as he went back to his work, as the second butler started to go his way. Back on the beach, Usopp sat frowning, remembering the events that occurred today. He let out a sigh of disappointment as he thought about how badly his father was badmouthed. Then suddenly something came from the tree he was sitting under, or rather someone. "There you are," Luffy exclaimed as he hung upside down a branch, startling Usopp. "Can't you even try to be normal?" Usopp asked. "You know, you can't let him get to you," Luffy said, let go of the branch and landed on the ground, trying to level himself using his hands. "Huh, what do you mean?" Usopp asked, confused. "I mean, your dad is a great man. Don't let that butler's words get to you," Luffy explained further. "Yeah, I know that, but it still hurts." He looked down at the ground, before looking at Luffy, who was laying on a tree side, and asked him, "Can you tell me about him?" Usopp for most of his life wondered what his dad was like. He remembered his mother when she was sick, how she told him to not let the people get to him, and how his old man was a great guy who was chasing his dreams. It was then that he decided to pull the pirate pranks in hope of one day that his dad would actually come. "Sure," Luffy shrugged. "Your dad was one of the best pirates I ever knew. In fact, he was one of my favorites." Luffy then added, "He was also one of the best sharpshooters there is. He even told me that he can shoot the wing of a fly without killing it." Usopp was awed by hearing about his old man, but Luffy's next question caught him off guard. "Are still going to go to that house?" Usopp looked conflicted. He truly liked Kaya and wanted to help her get better, but that damned butler was always in the way. It was like he was trying to make Kaya's depression get even worse. But at the same time, he couldn't just waltz there, so he decided the following. "Yeah, I think so, but only if that butler apologizes to me," Usopp said. "Oh, you mean him," Luffy said as he pointed his finger over the hill. They were sitting near. Usopp moved and looked over it. He then saw Klahadore waiting on the beach. Luffy then said, "He seems to be waiting for someone." Usopp replied sarcastically, "You don't say. Now, be quiet, oh, he won't hear us." Some time went by until both boys saw a weird-looking man who was walking backward come to where Klahadore was standing. Klahadore then spoke, "What took you so long?" Django then apologized, "I'm sorry, but I got caught up with something." "Never mind this now, let's get this over with," Klahadore said. He then started talking again. "Are the preparations ready?" Both boys were confused. Who was this man that the butler was speaking to? And what preparations he was talking about? "Yes, everything is ready for the assassination of the girl. What was her name?" "Yeah, Kaya," Django replied. Both boys were shocked at the reveal and silently asked themselves, "Assassination?